Hello, everyone. Bill Rawls here with our Facebook Live Marathon. 3 hours of questions and answers. So we're going to get through as many things as we possibly can. I know people will be coming and going, asking different kinds of questions. And so just to frame what kind of questions you can ask, I can't answer direct medical problems. So if I can't solve your particular situation, but if you can frame it in such a way that everybody gets benefit and I can answer it as a more general problem or a question, then yes, I'm glad to do that. So we'll be careful about, those kinds of questions. But we'll try to get to as many as we possibly can. For those of you who don't know me, I've been a physician for 30 years. I started out practicing obstetrics and gynecology, call and stress, really disrupted my health, and I had a major health crisis at age 47, identified initially with fibromyalgia, later found the microbes with Lyme disease, and found that conventional medicine, antibiotics, etc., really wasn't a solution for me. I ended up turning to natural herbal therapy, supported by lifestyle modifications, and since deeply researched into this topic of stealth microbes and the connections they have with so many chronic illnesses. So what we call chronic Lyme is really actually much bigger than I think anybody is looking at. And that's been the emphasis of everything that I've been doing over the past 10 years, along with helping as many people understand this very difficult to understand condition. And that is the first step in getting well. So I'm sure we're going to have lots of questions. If my voice starts to falter a little bit, I'll try to speak up as much as I can, but we'll go at it for 3 hours straight. So if you're out there, send in your questions. I am wide open. So first question, can you test for Lyme disease? Can you test negative for Lyme disease but be positive? In other words, carry the microbe without actually having a positive test. Actually, that's really common. This is a big one. So when you look at Lyme disease, we're defining Lyme disease as an infection with a microbe called Borrelia burgdorferi. So first of all, it is one of a dozen different forms of Borrelia that we know species of Borrelia worldwide that cause Lyme disease. And what we're finding now, other species of Borrelia are being carried in a variety of ticks, even here in the United States. You hear about deer ticks and dog ticks, but there are 90 different species of ticks here in the United States. And what we're finding is that different species of Borrelia are carried by those different ticks, though classically the deer tick is the one that is most often passing the Borrelia burgdorferi microbe. So beyond that, it depends on when you're tested. Most of the testing is designed for a very specific window of acute infection, so that couple of weeks out to a couple of months out after the tick bite, when that microbe first enters your system, then that's when you have the highest chance of testing positive, because that's when the microbe is coursing through the blood and the immune reaction is the strongest. So that's the window. That's how they define the sensitivity, or how good the test is. So if it's 95% sensitive, then there's a pretty high probability that you're going to catch it in that short window. But most people being tested are chronic infection. They've been going at it for a long time, and so that immune reaction is attenuated. The microbes are deep in the tissues, so you just don't see it. And beyond that, there are many microbes. I've got a list of 100 different microbes that can cause similar symptoms to those that are common with Lyme disease. So so there are a lot of different microbes. So putting it in a class that we call the stealth microbes, I'm finding it's really big. You may not be able to read this list very well, but it's there are just there are dozens and dozens and dozens of microbes that can cause similar infections. It's really interesting. I read an article the other day that suggested that Rocky Mountains, the microbe Rickettsia that causes Rocky Mountain spotted fever, can also cause symptoms that are identical to Lyme disease. So you could test negative for Lyme disease, but actually be carrying Rickettsia. And I think this is true for a lot of different microbes. So the point is, you almost have to assume that they're there. That is just part of it. That's part and parcel of the whole thing. So other things, just some announcements. Don't forget that our book giveaway ends at midnight tonight, and a copy of my book, Unlocking Lyme, to be the guidebook to help people beyond what they're getting at their general physician or even Lyme doctors. Most physicians really don't understand Lyme disease, and I do because of my unique situation of having struggled with it for so long and ultimately overcome it. So I wrote the book. I spent a year of my life doing nothing but putting down everything that I could possibly thought was pertinent to Lyme disease and Lyme disease recovery in this book. And here for Lyme Awareness Month, we're giving it away. So all you have to do is pay for shipping, and we will get it to you. So the code is free book, and just go to my website, rawlsmd.com, and get your copy for sure. Another question: how does Lyme and other microbes cause vertigo? Neurological, central or peripheral nerves, or via the joints and muscles, or both? Well, it's I've never seen a study that defines exactly the mechanism, but we know that the microbes are in the brain, right? In fact, there are some studies showing that we all have a microbiome of the brain, which is really interesting, I think. There are several studies that have come out in the past 2 years that define that we all have a spectrum of microbes in our brain that are present. And when your immune system is disrupted and you have chronic immune dysfunction, those microbes start to flourish. So they really are in all parts of the brain and all parts of our body. Very low concentrations, hard to find. The studies that were done showing microbes in the brain were autopsy specimens, so it's not something you can test for in a living person very easily. You have to assume that they're there. But balance is associated with our semicircular canals, which are part of our inner ear. So you've got a canal that has little hairs in it and little calcium crystals, and one side has to be balanced with the other side for you to keep stabilized. And it's so it's really important. So if one side is disrupted from the other side, then you get vertigo. Then the messages going to your brain are dysfunctional. Balance is also a part of the cerebellum. So we know that many chronic illnesses affect the cerebellum and disrupt balance. But it's mainly brain. It's not as much peripheral nerves. It's more brain. And again, the solution, the long-term solution, is suppressing the microbes, restoring immune function. Short-term, there are medications for it. There's a drug called Antivert that can help. There are different. The ENT physicians do have protocols that you can go through, just some positioning that helps balance those semicircular canals. But I found that, I had it when I was struggling, and it was really just getting over the microbes, taking the supplements that are really important as anything. So let's see. Current question. and we're getting loads of questions. So my staff is helping me just pick out questions, and we're going to get as many common questions as we can. So it's going to be hard to keep up with all of them. Again, I'll get to as many as I possibly can. Question: Do you recommend a parasite cleanse while battling with chronic Lyme? So when we say that word parasite, what do we need? What is a parasite? A parasite is any organism that is functionally living off of another organism. So technically, all of our normal flora, all of these stealth microbes in our body, all of the things that are host-dependent microbes are technically parasites, all right? But when most people say the word parasite, they're talking about intestinal parasites in the intestine. And so parasites, when you look at, these are multicellular organisms, typically worms and that sort of thing, that get defined as intestinal parasites. And we aren't exposed to them as historically as much as humans used to be, or as much as people in third world areas that have poor sanitation. So you've got to have an egg larva adult connection. So when you're talking about one-celled organisms, both protozoa and bacteria, then those kinds of organisms reproduce by just cell division. And so they can keep reproducing and refreshing themselves inside your body for pretty much as long as you're alive, as long as they have resources to do so. But when you talk about multicellular parasites or multicellular worms, it's a different thing. So you actually have to either ingest eggs or larvae, depending on the parasite, and that has to go through a life cycle in your body. So with a worm, it would go through your body, ultimately ending up in your intestines and hanging on to your intestines and passing eggs. The eggs pass out of your body and are dispersed in your feces. But the eggs don't necessarily hatch inside your body to make new parasites, all right? And the parasites do have a life cycle. They'll eventually die and pass on. So to get parasites, you have to ingest eggs or larvae. And typically where that's happening is you have to have contamination of your food. It has to get in your body. There's some kinds that can get through your skin. But if you're wading in contaminated water or your own wet grass, but most people wear shoes. So most people in this country aren't getting high levels of parasites. We all get some a little bit, if you eat salads, occasionally there's going to be an egg there. But it's very different than say a dog that's going out and constantly eating grass that has contamination of the grass with eggs or larvae, and they're taking that in their body. So they're constantly building that cycle. So we're typically not doing that. Our food supply is very clean. We cook most of our food. So we're not getting the same kind of exposure that somebody in a third world country that had poor sanitation and their food had fecal contamination. That being said, I think we're still getting it. And I've read studies in the third world looking at people that have the highest parasite load, and they're the people that have a chronic immune dysfunction. So if your immune system has been compromised, your immune system doesn't take care of these things. Whereas when they looked at people in third world countries that had high exposure, but they had strong immune systems, they typically had low parasite load. So a big thing is keeping your immune system strong. And then the herbs really have a high propensity to get rid of these things. So as far as treating of parasites, there are a lot of different herbs that have the effect. Andrographis and cat's claw in our products are really important for anti-parasite. They've been both used for anti-parasites, but there are many others. Classic combinations are clove, black walnut, Mimosa pudica. Those are all good things that you have to do. But what I would say is most people probably don't need that. Most people can get by with just taking the standard Lyme protocol because it's going to have some coverage for intestinal type parasites. If you feel for some reason like your exposure is high, I think it's fine to take products that have some of those other ingredients like clove. Artemisia is another one, and Mimosa pudica is a really good one. That's a really nice herb. It's kind of hard to find, but Mimosa pudica, that's a very, very nice herb that has some good parasite coverage. So let's see. Question from Ismet. What is your opinion on hyperthermia therapy or hypothermia treatment for Lyme? Yeah, this is a big one. A lot of people are doing. We all want that thing. We want to go to the doctor and say, I'm miserable. And the doctor says, I've got this thing that will fix you. And all you have to do is come and have it done to you. And what we find in chronic illness is these things that I call heroic therapies don't work unless you're building a foundation to restore your immune system. And I've talked to a lot of people that have had hyperthermia. What is hyperthermia? Basically, what they do is, and this is not done in the United States. Most people that are having it done are going to Germany. You go and they put you under anesthesia and they raise your body temperature to 107 for a prolonged period of time, with the idea that these kinds of microbes don't survive very well under that high temperature, and therefore you kill off microbes. Well, first of all, you're not going to eliminate all the microbes with it. That is absolutely, I'm not sure anything eliminates the microbes, but I'm definitely sure that hypothermia doesn't do it. But another thing you're doing is you're taking a huge hit to your immune system. So that is very important to distinguish. That the conventional medical community doesn't seem to distinguish between acute infections and chronic infections. An acute infection is a new introduction of a brand new microbe into your system. And the symptoms that occur are the scuffle between the immune system and the microbe. If the immune system has never seen that microbe before with something like Ebola, the microbe may win. Ebola kills a lot of people. But the microbes that are carried by ticks like Borrelia, typically our immune system knows them pretty well. So often that initial infection isn't very much, and people hardly know it. Chronic infection occurs when the immune system is disrupted by definition. So typically chronic infections are not one infection. The microbes are already there. Microbes have been in place. The immune system is disrupted, and therefore microbes in your system are able to flourish. Now, sometimes it's a bad infection with an acute infection with a microbe that initiates the immune dysfunction. If you survive something like Ebola virus, your immune system would be struggling for a good while, and that would make you more susceptible to many other illnesses. But most of the time it's other factors, other kinds of stress factors, and it's often a combination of food, of so many other kinds of things, chronic stress, inactivity, sedentary lifestyle, a toxic environment. The different agencies around the world, like the World Health Organization, they're really starting to tally up the toll that all of the environmental toxins that we're exposed to have with us, and it's great. It's huge. They're just, it really, really hits us hard. So it's, so distinguishing between acute infection and chronic infection. So most people that are going for hyperthermia therapy have chronic Lyme disease. So you start out by defining that as chronic immune dysfunction with microbes, not a microbe, but a spectrum of microbes, what we call co-infections, and that really goes beyond just the classic co-infections. All of these microbes thriving in the body, causing inflammation and causing us to be causing us to be sick. So yes, hyperthermia is going to knock those microbe counts down, but it's also going to knock your immune system down. And typically what I found that people go through it, they feel better for a while, weeks, months, but before long, they're right back to where they were, because once those microbes start flourishing again, they haven't restored their immune system function. So they're really just not going to get better. So I like to put it in perspective. Tim, if you get that pyramid of I like to put it in perspective of the different kinds of therapy. So heroic therapies would be antibiotics, hyperthermia, ozone, all of these kinds of therapies, which can be important, but that ought to be the last thing you're doing instead of the first thing you're doing. The next tier is symptomatic therapies. We all have symptoms of pain and poor sleep, and a lot of times up front, you have to address those to get well. But if you're not building that restorative base, I call it, that foundation of herbal therapy, good diet, good sleep, low stress, if you're not doing all those things to get well, then you're just not going to get better. So quite frankly, I'd love to see this as a study. I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. But I'd like to take a group of people that were both spending equal amounts of money, and one group was going to Germany for hyperthermia therapy, and the other group was going somewhere like Costa Rica for a yoga retreat for 3 or 4 weeks, which is probably going to cost less than hyperthermia. So you could actually stay for 3 or 4 weeks for the same amount of money, right? So you're eating great food, you're taking all of your herbs, the stresses of the world are gone. You're not sitting in front of a computer all day. You're getting good sleep at night. I would be willing to bet that those people are going to have a much better outcome than anybody doing hyperthermia, chronic antibiotic therapy, or anything else. So part of that recovery process is making your world as close to that as you can possibly get it. And sometimes that's hard. And it's the difference between being active and proactive in your recovery and being passive. And our medical system fosters dependence and a passive patient. And I can tell you, when you're in the medical system and you're dependent on the medical system for chronic therapies and you're passive in the system, you're not going to get ultimately well. The most that you can expect is just a compromised state of managed illness. So that's what the book is all about. It arms you. I've talked about hyperthermia. I talk about all the different heroic therapies, the good and the bad of them. And but all the other things that you really need to do to build that foundation. So it's very important that you do that. If you haven't read the book, I think you would find it as a real asset. And don't just put it aside as this is a giveaway. This is a special thing that we're doing for Lyme awareness. My goal is to help as many people as I can, and get your copy of your book. I think it will make a difference in your life. So a question from Chuck. Do herbs remove bad microbes and leave the good in the gut? Yeah, that's one of the coolest things about herbs. And that's one of the biggest things that suppresses herbs with antimicrobial properties from from antibiotics. So antibiotics, we're talking about a single synthetic chemical that's directed at one aspect of the bacteria, how it reproduces, or some other thing to try to block that pathway. And bacteria are, there's a certain intelligence in bacteria in that when they're reproducing just by just turning over generations every 20 minutes to 12 hours, they keep, by trial and error, finding ways to get around those things. So sooner or later, all microbes become resistant to a single chemical bacteria or a single chemical antibiotic. All microbes with time will become resistant. And that's a huge worldwide problem. It's just, it's massive. So so antibiotic resistance is a huge problem. I think one of our biggest saviors is going to be herbal therapy. Why herbs? The herbs, the antimicrobial properties with herbs are very, very different than a synthetic antibiotic. So you're not talking about one chemical, you're talking about hundreds of chemicals that affect the microbes in a suppressive way, broad spectrum against the microbes. But the interesting thing is they don't seem to affect our normal flora. And you have to think about this in terms of what is the plant trying to do by producing these chemicals. Plants don't have an immune system that's the same as ours. We have a cellular immune system. We have white blood cells that go after the microbes in our body. So we have this complex cellular immune system. Plants essentially have a biochemical immune system. They don't use cells, they use chemicals. It's basically chemical warfare. So plants are producing chemicals to protect themselves against microbes, against insects, against a variety of other kinds of threats. So when we are taking an herb in, we're basically taking the plant's immune system, its immune support, and supporting our own. So when you have to think about it, well, that our immune system doesn't kill off our normal flora, but it does recognize pathogens. Same thing in the plants. The plants are going to build biochemistry that supports their normal flora, non-harmful microbes, and suppresses the pathogens so they can survive. So it's a really important part of a healthy plant. Now, different plants, depending on where they evolved, are going to have stronger antimicrobial properties for certain microbes over others. So it depends on where it evolved, where it's grown, and the conditions it's grown under. Very, very important for how you ultimately get that. So when you combine different herbs together from different places, you get a broad range of antimicrobial properties. Andrographis from India, cat's claw from the Amazon, rhodiola from Siberia. You combine different herbs and you're going to get slightly different properties because those plants have had to evolve in different conditions or different places. So that's really important for ultimately solving this problem, because these stealth microbes are deeply in tissues and they're affecting the whole body. And so it's very important to affect them in a way that you're going to be able to suppress them long term without disrupting your own normal flora. And herbs are the best solution. Very different than like an acute pneumonia. An acute pneumonia, you've got a fast-growing microbe that's consolidated in one area of the body, extracellular. These microbes aren't living in cells, but they're attacking cells. IV antibiotics in the hospital, and it'll knock it right out before you really disrupt your normal flora severely. Weeks and weeks or months and months of antibiotics, you're going to disrupt your normal flora and further disrupt your immune system. Remember, the whole key to this recovery thing is restoring your immune system function, because the only thing that can balance your microbes, fight off biofilms, get the cyst forms of Borrelia, anything else, is your immune system. So if you're trying to do it artificially outside, if you're ignoring your immune system, you will not get well. There's just no doubt about that. So got a quick prod here for you are involved in our 3-hour marathon session of answering Lyme disease questions. And don't forget, our book giveaway is going on. Get your copy of free book at Rawls MD, and the book is Unlocking Lyme. Support the Live Lyme Foundation. This is a really good cause for supporting Lyme disease awareness around the world. And yes, there'll be a marathon. There will be a transcript of this whole thing. So if you want the whole transcript, fortunately, it'll come to you by email and not by paper. So if you'd like the whole transcript from the whole thing, that will be available. So next question from Joni. What herbs have a direct effect on Bartonella? Well, again, when you're talking about herbs, you're talking about suppression, and you're talking about many chemicals in every herb. So plants, yes, some plants are going to have stronger antimicrobial properties than others, but they're having to protect themselves against a wide range of different types of microbes. So you're going to get pretty good coverage from everything. So kind of the standard Lyme protocol with cat's claw and andrographis and Japanese knotweed and garlic is going to give you pretty good Bartonella coverage. Beyond that, there are some other herbs out there that have better Bartonella and Babesia coverage. Top of the list is Cryptolepis. That's a really nice herb. Houtonia is a very nice herb. Alcornia, Bidens, Acida acuta. So there are a number of them. I think that neem has some Bartonella activity, and possibly Mimosa pudica has some Bartonella activity. So there are a lot of different herbs that you can use that I think are really, really nice herbs. And the thing about it, what I tell people to do is start with a foundation protocol. And my foundation is typically cat's claw, andrographis, Japanese knotweed, and sarsaparilla, garlic, some of those herbs. And this comes from originally from Stephen Booner, who wrote a book called Healing Lyme in 2005. He's written a number of books since then, and it's I don't agree with everything that he says, but I think he's added a lot to the table for Lyme disease. But he suggested this original protocol for treating Lyme disease, and thousands upon thousands of people have used it, enough that it's a good foundation. So it's not to say that you couldn't make up a entry protocol with a lot of other different herbs, or that you couldn't take other herbs. In fact, I encourage people to. But starting with that foundation really does a lot. It's a good place to start. I find that in 3 to 6 months, 50 to 75% of people get benefit with just the core alone. And then if you're not getting there, it's hard to chase these things down. I'm telling you, you can spend thousands upon thousands of dollars chasing down the diagnosis. And because there are hundreds of potential microbes, it's really difficult. So the protocol I normally use is start with a core. If that's working, great. Continue with that core. If it's not working, add other herbs to it. Add some of the ones that I mentioned. There's just an unlimited number of herbs. There's so many out there. Neem, prickly ash. They're just the bone set. I mean, there's just an almost unlimited number of herbs that either have strong antimicrobial properties or immune modulating properties. But what I'm finding is virtually all herbs have some antimicrobial properties. So any herbs that you're taking, you're going to get some benefit. It's just that some are better than others. So let's see. Next question from Deborah. My worst symptom is peripheral neuropathy. So what is peripheral neuropathy? That's just nerve dysfunction. And both feet have burning pain and numbness that is progressing up into my ankles and lower legs. Very distressing. What to do? Be persistent. That was one of my most aggravating symptoms also is the burning feet. Just your feet feeling like they're on fire all the time. And just so that not being able to really feel your feet well is very, very uncomfortable. That is a symptom. And I think here it's important to define that when you treat a symptom, and when you look at most of the drugs out there, they're treating symptoms. So what are we doing when we're treating a symptom? We are basically treating the pathway to try to block that symptom artificially. So it's not really getting rid of the disease process, though. It's not getting rid of the causes. So even though you're blocking it, so there's a drug called Lyrica that's typically used for this, but Lyrica has a lot of other side effects, and it doesn't eliminate the problem, it just covers it up. And that's true of most drugs out there. You're not resolving the problem. You're basically artificially covering up the problem. And so the problem doesn't go away, and it eventually catches up with you. And what happens with Lyrica is people develop tolerance to it, and they eventually get worse instead of better. I did not use drugs. There's another called gabapentin, and people develop tolerance to it over time. So that can be really frustrating if you're trying to use drugs to cover up the symptoms. So you can take those drugs, but it's not going to necessarily eliminate the problem. And the problem is that the tissue, the microbes in the tissues and the inflammation are affecting myelin of the nerves and are affecting the conduction of the nerve. They're affecting the spinal cord. They're infecting the brain, so that we have nerve dysfunction. So you have to suppress the microbes and restore things back to normal. It took me about a year of taking herbs before the burning feet started to resolve. But it did gradually resolve. So again, you can treat the symptom, and the thing that's going to treat the symptom best is drugs like Lyrica and gabapentin, but they're not going to get rid of the cause. So it's ultimately, you're going to be back where you started. So short term, that might be an option, but definitely do the restorative protocol, get on the herbs, and do the things that you need for the body to heal itself so the actual symptom goes away, so the process is restored to normal. And that way you're going to get well. So that's ultimately going to be the thing that's going to help you out the most. Next question from Michael. How common is it to have thyroid issue with Lyme disease? I have gotten hypothyroid with it. Yeah, it's really common. And I think that's one of the first things that people check. When I was struggling with this whole issue, you have all these symptoms, fatigue, which is classically everybody checks thyroid when you are fatigued. And the go-to solution is thyroid medication. So a lot of people with fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome, and chronic Lyme end up with thyroid dysfunction. So is it the thyroid, or is it the stress of the disease process? And personally, I think, when you're looking at this kind of hypothyroidism, it's mostly the stress of the disease process. The thyroid is part of the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, which is a very important pathway that affects metabolism, temperature, sleep and wake cycles, everything in the body. So the hypothalamus and pituitary drive or run the thyroid gland. So if you've disrupted your hypothalamus with chronic stress, and just the stress of chronic illness, it's going to affect your thyroid pathways too. And that can result in thyroid dysfunction. There is also a microbe component to hypothyroidism. Mycoplasma has been associated with hypothyroidism, and Mycoplasma is the top co-infection. 75% of people, and I think it's probably even higher with Lyme, chronic Lyme, have hypothyroidism or have mycoplasma. So I think there's a connection there. So it's the stress of chronic illness, possibly a microbe connection that affects thyroid gland function. People get put on thyroid medication. When you're taking the thyroid medication, however, it suppresses your normal thyroid function. So short term, I think it can have value. It can give people a boost. But I found that an awful lot of people who use herbs, do the restorative protocol, and actually get better, actually get so they don't need their thyroid hormone anymore because their thyroid starts working well because the pathways are working well. So everything is restored to normal. You suppress the microbes, you restore normal immune function, things come back to normal. And by the way, the mycoplasma, it's classified as a co-infection. Does that mean it's spread by ticks? Not necessarily. We know that it can come in ticks, but I think most people pick it up when they're kids. Mycoplasma pneumoniae is a really, really common respiratory infection in kids. It's one of the really sneaky stealth microbes, these intercellular microbes that once you have it, even if you're treated with antibiotics for a chronic walking pneumonia or whatever, you don't completely eradicate that thing in your body. It stays dormant in your tissues for your whole lifetime. I truly think most of these things become part of your microbiome. That's why it's important to keep a strong immune system to stay ahead of illness. So mycoplasma, I think, is something that's there. It's dormant in tissues. People end up with chronic Lyme disease because they've disrupted their immune system function. So mycoplasma and all these other microbes can start flourishing. You can get different versions of mycoplasma and chlamydia sexually, and there's chlamydia is another one that's very similar. You can get that as a respiratory infection. So once you have it for a lifetime. Even if you've been treated with antibiotics, it's still in your body. Herbs are really important. Next is questions from Janine. Can a mom pass Lyme to a child while pregnant? And can children take the same types of supplements as adults? Yes and yes. That's short answers there to that. So yes. We know it can be. There was a study out this past year that they looked at all the reports that could potentially be associated with Lyme disease being passed in pregnancy, in utero transmission, so the child got it. And they found that the incidence was pretty low, but there were cases published where it was defined that Borrelia was passed through the placenta. Not as common, I mean, the whole purpose of this microbe is to spread from one host to another host. So it's going to try to spread from one place to the next, from one host to the next host to the next host to the next host. And different microbes specialize in different pathways. The spirocate syphilis prefers to be spread sexually, so that's how you're going to see it transmitted most often. Borrelia is really specialized in ticks, and a lot of microbes do, because microbes are really nature's perfect vehicle for transmitting a microbe from one host to the next. I mean, it's really ideal because they stay attached for a long time, plenty of time for the microbes to be transmitted. So that's what Borrelia likes. All of these microbes, though, are opportunists. They're going to take every opportunity they can get to be passed from one host to the next. So yes, I think it is. And in my practice, all the families I've seen, kids, husbands, wives that have had Lyme disease, situations where the husband is a hunter, the wife doesn't go out in the woods, she ends up with Lyme disease along with the kids. Yeah, I think it can happen. There's no doubt about it. But it doesn't happen in people with a strong immune system. That's the big deal. So keeping your immune system strong, I just can't say that enough, is really, really important for staying ahead of this thing. It's just so important for you to keep a healthy immune system. But spreading sexually, yes, I think that's possible. I found a recent study where they found that people with a positive Lyme test, in other words, they were sick with Lyme disease, they had the microbe coursing through their body. Males had high concentrations of the microbe in their semen. Females had high concentrations in vaginal fluid, but that was just when they were the most sick. So yes, it does occur, but again, the microbe really likes ticks. So for a reset, I'm Dr. Bill Rawls. We're doing a 3-hour marathon session of answering questions about Lyme disease. We're 45 minutes into our 3 hours. If you have questions, please join us. And the core of this whole thing, if you don't get your question answered here, I guarantee it's in my book, Unlocking Lyme, because I spent a year going through all the questions that people were asking about Lyme disease. So free copy of that, and that is ending today. So make sure you get your copy of it today. That is really important, and we're doing that just to support Lyme Awareness Month this month. So it's a free book, and all you got to do is pay for shipping. Live Lyme Foundation is a great for Lyme disease awareness. That's very important. And if you want all of the transcript from this 3-hour session, all the questions that I've answered, you're welcome to that also. All you have to do is contact us. So next question. So if you could move that one up so I can see a little bit better there.
Move which one?
The next question.
You have to scroll that. You can't control it.
No, I have to scroll. Okay. I got it. Okay. It's not scrolling. There it is. Here we go. Got it. All right. Good enough. Thank you. Next question from Deborah. One protocol we heard is that if you're bitten by a deer tick and realize it within a few hours after the bite, you should take 200 milligram tablets of doxycycline to possibly prevent infections. What is your opinion on that? Yeah, that's what the CDC is recommending. At least they were recommending it, and it was posted on their website. The last time I've looked in the past several months, I can't find it anywhere. And the evidence to support it was pretty marginal at best, but they were only recommending it in high-risk areas like New England, where it was considered high concentrations of Lyme disease. And so if you were bitten by a tick, their current recommendation, which I don't necessarily disagree with, is if you get bitten by a tick, you don't do anything unless you get symptoms. And then if you get symptoms, then you do the 21-day course of antibiotics. But they changed that and said, okay, if you're bitten by a tick in a high-risk area, so we know that about 50% of the ticks in New England are carrying Borrelia, then you can take 200 milligrams of doxycycline to prevent getting ill. And there was a limited study showing it may prevent acute symptoms if you do that. So just what's my opinion on that? Well, first of all, what that tells me is they don't really understand Lyme disease. It's these microbes are not eliminated by any antibiotics. And all we're doing with antibiotic therapy is reducing the numbers of microbes to help the immune system get a handle on it, but it's not eliminating them from the body. There are multiple studies. A recent one showing that there was an interesting study. They took a dozen people who were symptomatic had chronic symptoms. So this 12 people had been diagnosed with Lyme disease by CDC criteria and then treated with the 21 days of antibiotics by CDC guidelines, and a high percentage of them, virtually all of them, had Borrelia, active live Borrelia in their blood. So 21-day antibiotics doesn't eliminate these microbes. So I think it's very unlikely that a 200 milligram single dose of doxycycline is going to eliminate them, especially right after the tick bite. these things, but it, knock it down in your system a little bit. I don't have studies to prove it, but in my opinion, herbs are a lot better solution, because you can take herbs for a long time. You can take herbs continually. And I do, I continue to take herbs. I don't think I've eradicated these microbes from my body. I don't think anything does. Hypothermia, antibiotics, anything else, ozone, nothing completely eliminates these microbes. Don't be fooled. So I take herbs to keep my immune system healthy, and I can take herbs to continually suppress microbes. Because when we're looking at it, here's the deal. The deeper I dig, the more connections I find between these microbes: Mycoplasma, Chlamydia, Borrelia, Bartonella, Epstein-Barr, all of these things between the microbes, immune dysfunction, and chronic illness. When you look at MS, when you look at Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, chronic Lyme, all of these things, the common denominator is chronic immune dysfunction. And that allows these microbes to flourish. Well, here's the deal. Your microbes are not getting old in the same way as the rest of the cells in your body. And so as you get older, your immune system ages like all the rest of your body. All the cells in your immune system age. Your microbes are turning over every 22 minutes to 12 hours. So technically, their lifespan is really short, but microbes are really simple. So when microbes divide, they basically refresh themselves. So if you got a tick bite that you got microbes from 20 years ago, the microbes that are in your body now are, of course, not the same. Those are long gone. But their offspring are just as healthy and just as strong as those original ones, right? But your immune cells are aging. And so as we get older, it's more and more important for us to help support our immune system. And again, the best way to do that is herbs, because the herbs you're basically taking the plant's immune system or multiple plants' immune systems and supporting your own immune system. So suppressing the microbes, boosting your immune system, boosting how your immune system works, so it helps you keep ahead of these things. So that's really, really important in getting ahead of this thing and staying ahead of this thing. I've rambled on so long, I've forgotten the original question. What was that question?
Antibiotic treatment.
Antibiotic treatment. So back to that 200 milligrams of doxycycline. It's, I think the potential for harm is really small, but does that protect you? No, I don't think so. And that's, and the studies were pretty marginal. That's probably why I can't find it on the CDC's website. They just took it down. I do agree that only taking antibiotics, not because you didn't get microbes. I think every tick bite is suspicious. But if you didn't get symptoms, then that means your immune system is strong and is taking care of these things. That being said, there's absolutely nothing wrong with taking herbs to support it. In fact, right now, if I went hiking this afternoon and got a tick bite and didn't find it for a couple of days, the first thing I would do is increase the doses of my different herbs and probably add some other herbs on. I don't even know that I would do antibiotics. That being said, that's a personal opinion. I don't think there's anything wrong with following the CDC's the recommendations and doing the antibiotics, but don't be fooled. Don't be fooled. I mean, you're not going to get by. You're not going to eradicate the microbes with 200 milligrams or 21 days of doxycycline. It's just not going to happen. So that's So be smart about it. And the herbs really are pretty smart. That's a really important thing to do. So next question from Carrie. How do you repair the HPA axis? We have an HP axis slide?
It's for sleep, but it could be a start.
Throw it up there. Yeah, sure. All right, so what is the HPA axis? The HPA axis is the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, right? The hypothalamus is basically like a thermostat in your brain. It's controlling all of the automatic functions. So it's controlling sleep and wake cycles, it's controlling temperature, it's controlling metabolism. And it does so by working through the pituitary gland. So it's, it's like the hypothalamus is the manager and the pituitary is the secretary. So the manager sends messages to the secretary, and then the secretary fans out other messages. So it's controlling the adrenal glands, your stress glands, which also do metabolism, your thyroid, and ovaries or testes, depending on which sex you are. So it's so when you're stressed, your big boss is your brain, and and so if you're stressed out, you're sending messages to your hypothalamus that you're constantly under threat. So your hypothalamus is continually mobilizing resources and shutting down reproductive function to take care of whatever threat's at hand. Well, if that's in the olden days and it's just a tiger and you run away and you get away, then you're fine for the rest of the day. But in our world, the tiger never goes away. We're constantly under threat, and therefore we really run ourselves into the ground. And once you really feed this pathway of stress over and over and over again, you overactivate those pathways and you get sympathetic overactivity that disrupts your normal circadian rhythm, so you don't sleep. Your adrenaline stays high, and your body just ends up really dragging because it's a mess. So the short answer is limiting the stress factors. So what are the different stress factors? Chronic illness, the microbes are part of stress, the inflammation in the body. Just the stress of being ill and trying to deal with the regular world, working, deadlines, children, all the things that we have to do to just make our world work become really challenging if you have a chronic illness. It's very, very frustrating. And that affects your sleep. So a lot of people ask me, they come in and say, I'm just fatigued, I'm dragging all the time. I need something to boost me up. And the first question I ask is, how much sleeping are you? How is your sleep? And the answer is usually, oh, terrible. I'm only sleeping about 4 to 6 hours a night. Well, if you're not sleeping, you're not going to feel good during the daytime. It's just as simple as that. You really need 8 hours of good sleep. So it's restoring it's minimizing these stress factors. We can't get rid of stress, but we can live around a lot of these stress factors. Choosing to eat a good diet, choosing to minimize toxins in your world, choosing to not watch stimulating television like Game of Thrones at 9 or 10 o'clock at night and then expecting a good night's sleep. Choosing just better health habits in general, choosing a lifestyle that puts less pressure on you. Again, I said it earlier in this thing that if we took you to Costa Rica or some beautiful Greek island and you had great food and good herbs and good rest and no computer screens and no stress, and the world was just basically stress-free, within 2 to 3 months, I guarantee everybody out there would be on their way to wellness. It would have a remarkable effect. But we can't do that. It's not practical. So we do as much of it as we can in our own world to make our world like that. And the more we can do that, those choices, it's there's a lot of discussions about politics and all kinds of inflammatory topics going on. But if you're recovering from chronic illness, you really don't need to pay attention to those things. You got to make your world really small and just focus on the things that you can manage, that you can control. Aside from that, there are really nice herbs for helping to restore the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. I actually have a product. My first product that I ever made was named after that because I found it to be so valuable. So top of that list was ashwagandha. Ashwagandha is from Africa. It's also in India. It's a wonderful, wonderful herb that has restorative properties, that it feeds back to the hypothalamus and it balances some of that really pounding feedback that the hypothalamus is getting. So it balances the hypothalamus and pituitary, and that works its way all the way down to the train, to the adrenals and everything else. Some of your calming herbs, there are philodendron and magnolia species that I put in that particular product that are really, really nice for helping to balance those functions and promote, calm in the adrenal pathways that are really good. So that so that's nice. And then the other ingredient in that particular supplement is L-theanine. L-theanine is an amino acid you find in green tea, and it has the interesting effect of competing with exciting neurotransmitters in the brain. So it doesn't have any habituating or properties. It's a really, really nice substance to add to that balancing effect. So you're affecting the overexcited part of the brain without affecting the GABA system, which is very, very delicate. You've got to be careful of how you mess with the GABA system. And that's what all the sleep drugs and benzodiazepines and things like that affect. And that's why they're so habituating. So that's a really nice herb for that, just to support all of that pathway. And I found that it just works extremely well. Works well for a lot of other things too. I found that it was just not much better for menopausal symptoms, including hot flashes. Just really, really nice for that. Really, very good. Next question from Melanie. Can a tick bite cause rheumatoid arthritis? Most rheumatologists in the country would say, nah, that's Lyme disease. Lyme disease isn't the same thing as rheumatoid arthritis. So no, tick bites don't cause rheumatoid arthritis. But wait a minute. You remember me saying a little earlier that 75% of people with chronic Lyme disease are found to have mycoplasma. And very interestingly, mycoplasma has been associated with rheumatoid arthritis. Mycoplasma is the smallest of all bacteria. Most of its genome is devoted toward affecting cells. So basically it enters cells. It's an intercellular microbe that takes over the machinery of the cell. It's almost like a super virus. So it's smaller than most bacteria, but it still does have an envelope that we call a cell wall. But it is different than all the other microbes out there. Really, really super small. About 1,000 times smaller than your average cell in your body. So it's really, really tiny. And it's but there have been associations, and it's really interesting. There was research back in the 70s that they were looking at a few different species of mycoplasma. There's one called Mycoplasma fermentans and another one called pneumoniae, along with several others, that they were looking at the association between mycoplasma and rheumatoid arthritis. And they found that most people that had rheumatoid arthritis were carrying these microbes, or at least a high percentage of them. But they decided, well, if it's caused by the microbe, we can treat these people with antibiotics, and if they don't get well, we know it's not the microbe. And that's what they did. They treated with antibiotics, and people didn't get better. Some people got a little better, but it didn't completely cure it. So they decided, nah, must not be that. and they tabled the research and said, the heck with that one, which is kind of crazy. But anyway, when you look at mycoplasma, it is extremely resistant to antibiotics. We know now that you cannot eliminate it from the body with antibiotics, that people, once you have it, it becomes part of your microbiome. So that part of the equation wasn't very complete. And it was a faulty conclusion. So, but they found it in a very high percentage. But somebody did take a look at it. About 2007, a researcher looked at it again, and this was really interesting. They took synovial fluid. So they took people with rheumatoid arthritis, and they did an aspiration of the joint fluid, and they found that 88% of those people had mycoplasma fermentins in the joint fluid. And those can be spread by ticks, but you get them a lot of other ways too. But that's, but they didn't look for other microbes. So I'm telling you, in chronic immune dysfunction, you've got more than that. So it makes sense. So rheumatoid arthritis is an autoimmune disease, which means your body is attacking your own cells. Well, these microbes live inside cells, and one of the first things they do is they put out markers that flag that cell, that prevent the cell as flagging itself and as abnormal. Because the normal pathway, when a cell gets infected with a microbe, it's going to put out a flag and start waving it and say, I'm a defective cell, come and eliminate me. Well, these microbes block that from happening, so the cells, so they can persist inside the cells. But sooner or later, the immune system catches up with it, and it starts making antibodies to those cells, but all the other cells in the body like it. So if you've got cells that have been infected with mycoplasma in the joints, sooner or later, you would suspect that you're going to have some autoimmune reaction to that. Your body's going to start making some antibodies, and that can in itself be destructive, often more destructive than the microbe. So I think that's really important. What's really interesting, though, is the same researcher about a year later did a study where she took people who had osteoarthritis, basic garden variety arthritis that's supposedly just part of wear and tear, and did aspirations of joint fluid. And 80% of those people had mycoplasma pneumoniae in their joints. So yes, I think there's a strong connection with mycoplasma. Now, that's just one microbe. There's chlamydia and a range of viruses, Epstein-Barr, a lot of things have been associated. So again, I don't think it's one microbe. I think it's the immune dysfunction and these microbes flourishing in tissues that are causing these illnesses. So absolutely, there's a connection between rheumatoid arthritis and microbes. I think you're just crazy to ignore that. So reset again. Here we are. I'm Dr. Bill Rawls. We're doing a 3-hour marathon question and answer session for Lyme disease. We're 1 hour, 7 minutes into it. My voice is still hanging in there in the moment. Be aware that we have a book giveaway. If your question isn't answered here, I have put answers to virtually anything you could ask in my book, Unlocking Lyme. I devoted an entire year of my life to writing these things, to helping people. And, you can get a free copy this is the last day for Lyme Awareness Month. We're giving the book away. All you have to do is pay for shipping. If you get it, read it. It will make a difference in your life, I promise. Really important. Also, support the Live Lyme Foundation. That's a really wonderful charity for Lyme awareness. We're supporting it. You can find a lot more information about it at my website, rawlsmd.com. And if you would like all of the questions and answers that we've done in this 3-hour session, you can sign up to get the transcript for the entire thing, the whole thing. So, all right, next question after I get a sip of water. Next question from Liz. As a result of a long-term antibiotic treatment, I have Candida, which I cannot get rid of with strict diet or medications. Which herbs would you recommend? And do you have any other advice for Candida? It's a yeast, and basically we all have it in our gut and on our body. It's pretty much ubiquitous in the environment. It's your immune system that keeps you from having infections with it. One of the things that helps suppress it is favorable yeast in the gut and other favorable microbes. So when you take tons of antibiotics, you kill off all those favorable microbes and you allow that Candida to flourish. So it's not something you go out and get somewhere. It's already there. It's being suppressed by your immune system and the other microbes in your body. And if you disrupt those microbes and disrupt your body, the immune system, then this thing is allowed to flourish. Herbs are a nice solution for that because they suppress the Candida, but they don't disrupt the normal flora. So there are a lot of herbs that really help. The ones in the core that I promote as the core, Andrographis, Sarsaparilla, and cat's claw are really good for suppressing Candida. Garlic is also excellent. Stabilized Allicin garlic products are really, really good for that. So that can really help with Candida, and that's that's something that you can do. Beyond that, other herbs, any of the berberine and berberine containing herbs like golden seal, coptis are really ideal because they are concentrated in the gut. You don't absorb them very well systemically. So in one of our gut products, I have some protective agents plus berberine, and the berberine is there specifically to suppress pathogens like Candida and allow the others to flourish. Diet is really important. Cutting down carbohydrates that are absorbed and feeding these microbes. So Candida really thrives. And you have to be careful. So, some people get on the train of treating them with antifungals. And the problem with the antifungals is you suppress the Candida, but you also suppress your normal healthy yeast flora that are suppressing this thing. So as long as you're on the antifungal until the Candida becomes resistant to it, it's better. But as soon as you go off the antifungal, it flares back up. The herbs you can do long term, and they don't suppress the normal flora, so they allow those things to flourish. There is a probiotic you can take called Saccharomyces boulardii in addition to the herbs that can help suppress Candida. So those things are all important for maintaining that normal gastrointestinal health. And just lower stress and all the things you need to do to keep your immune system healthy. That's what it's all about here. So let's see. How do you know if you're completely healed from Lyme disease? Yeah, this gets back to conventional medicine's definition of cure, and especially when it comes to microbial infections. And this goes back to something called Koch's postulates, that was defined back in the mid 1800s. It said one microbe causes one acute illness, and everybody that is exposed to that microbe will get sick from that illness. So it's very well defined. So when you look at very highly virulent microbes like Ebola virus, that Koch's postulates work. But when you look at chronic infections with microbes and the stealth microbes, the whole argument completely falls apart. So this definition is different. So with that definition, it's like you identify the microbe that's causing the illness, you target that microbe with antibiotics or whatever, and when you eliminate the antibiotic, you're cured. There are just a lot of holes in that argument. So you would say, well, there were certain people that survived the Ebola outbreak in Africa. Their immune system was strong enough that they survived it. So if they've been returned to normal health, then they are cured, and the microbe is therefore gone, right? Actually not. What they're finding is their immune system learned how to take care of the microbe, so they're well now, but They didn't eliminate the Ebola from their body. It's still there. These people are still carrying Ebola, but they're not sick because their immune system learned how to take care of it. So again, immune system functions are really key to this thing, and so I think we have to look at Lyme disease very differently. So if I had to ask that question and say, well, have I eliminated all these microbes from my body? Because again, I don't think it's just Borrelia. I'm pretty sure that I had Bartonella and Mycoplasma and the whole range. Then am I cured? And technically, the conventional definition would be no, because I don't think I've eliminated these microbes at all. But I am living a symptom-free life and have been for a good 5 years now. And for me, that's a definition of cure, reaching a state of wellness so that you can have a symptom-free life and you can go about your life's activities in a normal way. And I think that's really important because, the microbes win in the end. That's sooner or later we all perish, and our microbes are the ones that are going to be left over when we're gone. So it's so I think the goal in life of any life is reaching a symptom-free state that you can enjoy life to its full potential. So a symptom-free state at age 60 is very different than a symptom-free stage at age 20. A 20-year-old has a much higher capacity of energy. Their cells are all fresh, and everything is pretty high level. I don't have that level of performance at age 60, but I'm not compromised by having symptoms. So I think that's where we ultimately want to be, and I think that's really important. All right, next question from Leah. Can some people have allergies to herbs? How do you check if you have an allergy to certain herbs if you are a person who tends to have allergies? This is an interesting question. I answered this one recently with one of our webinars, and I think it is something interesting to think about because we've had people that seemingly have a reaction or an allergy to an herb, and then they go for a month or two and they take different herbs and do different things, and they come back to that same herb and they don't have any problems with it anymore. And I think it is part of this whole thing that we call chronic Lyme disease. So one of the things that these stealth microbes in the body are doing is they're manipulating the immune system. So what they're trying to do is manipulate the immune system to go after to not focus on cells that have been infected with microbes. So these are all intracellular microbe infections. They live inside cells throughout the body. So they want to draw attention away from that. So by infecting white blood cells, they can send out messages to all the other parts of the immune system to shift the focus away from intercellular microbes. It's a difference in what's called a Th1 immune response and pushing it toward a Th2 immune response for those out there that wants the technical side of it. But I like to think of it as it's like a city as big as New York City. You're never going to eliminate all the criminals in New York City, but you need a really strong police force to keep them controlled. And that's basically what your immune system is. So you're never going to eliminate all these intercellular microbes. Some are worse than others. Some are petty theft. Some of them are murderers. And so you want to have a strong police force or a strong immune system to control that thing. So with your intercellular microbes, it would be like a group of criminals that specialized in hijacking police cars so they could get the radio in the police car and call into central dispatch and have all of the cops sent to the other side of the town where those groups of criminals aren't. Well, that's what your intercellular microbes are trying to do. So in shifting the attention away from them, they blow up or bolster the allergic response in our body. So it's really an interesting phenomenon that a lot of people with chronic Lyme have mast cell activation and they're hyperallergic. So they tend to be allergic to foods and herbs and a lot of things in those acute phases that they wouldn't have normally been. So I know I had a lot of food sensitivities and a lot of other things going on. So I think that sometimes happens with herbs when people are first starting them. They've got this hyperallergic response going on and they're very sensitive to things. It is possible for anyone to be allergic to any herb or basically anything, but it's also true that we don't see true allergies to herbs very often. And when we see a reaction to an herb, what we'd like to do is try to isolate it, figure out which one it is so the person can avoid that one. But again, often what we find is, we get them on other kinds of herbs or they find things that they can take. And the great thing is with herbal therapy, there are literally hundreds and hundreds of different herbs that you can choose from. There are choices that you can find that work for you. If one seems to cause a reaction, but again, once people are on something and they're starting to get well and they're on the protocol and they're restoring normal immune balance, which is one thing a lot of herbs do, once we get that normal immune balance restored, then they come back to that herb, they can take it, and it doesn't cause any significant problems, and they do okay. So if you think you've had a reaction to an herb, definitely stop taking that product, whatever it may be. Try to isolate the herb. We have a lot of combined products, and sometimes we'll get people to buy herbs independently so that they can try each herb and see if the reaction is reproduced with one herb or was it just to herbs in general. And a lot of times that initial introduction of therapy is kind of a balancing act of finding what works for you. This whole process is a lot of trial and error, but you can get there. And again, you may find that you can come back to taking that herb. And once your immune system settles down, you'll be okay. Along with the food sensitivities and all the other things that are really driving this whole thing. So let's see. Next question from Justin. Is cardiac Lyme life-threatening? I'm not living an active lifestyle because of tachycardia. Yeah, it certainly can be. And this one's pretty close to home to me. I mean, I had all the symptoms of chronic Lyme disease, and I had the burning feet, the neurological symptoms, the brain fog, the fatigue, feeling flu-like, all the muscle pains, joint pains, everything else. But the thing that was the most threatening was my heart. I had very significant involvement with heart, and at one point, this was before I knew I had Lyme disease. I had decided I was just going to exercise through the thing, and I was having skip beats and chest pain and all of these symptoms, and I was trying to just keep exercising, and I just kept hitting the wall. Finally, after a day of trying to surf and getting 2 waves and then lying down on the beach because I was in real distress, I went to my doctor. They saw ischemia on the EKG, and the next day I was in a cardiac cath. Cardiac cath showed that I had normal vessels. All the cardiologist had to offer was a beta blocker. And that was about the time that I said, I'm done. I'm going to find something else because they're not helping me. It was shortly after that I defined the Lyme microbes and recognized that, these microbes do invade the heart muscle. Borrelia invades the heart muscle. Bartonella invades heart blood vessels, along with Babesia. All of the Mycoplasma, Chlamydia, Epstein-Barr have all been found in heart valves, not necessarily in Lyme patients, but in other situations. So there's a close association there. And I was pretty miserable. I mean, truly, my heart was skipping a beat every second to third beat, very disconcerting. You just wonder, well, is it going to be up here in any minute here? Is it just not going to keep working here? And it was really threatening. But at that time, I was trapped in a situation where I couldn't get any care outside my community. And that's when I started taking the herbs. And it took about 3 years of taking the herbs steadily to get heart function back. But I was amazed that I was able to get pretty much everything back. I probably do have some scar tissue there. It may at some point limit my life in some capacity. But I'm pretty much doing whatever I want to do now, and I don't have the skip beats and I don't have the symptoms. That was with herbal therapy. That being said, I think it is important that if you have any heart symptoms, skipped beats, tachycardia, runs of high heart rate, chest pain, anything else, go and be evaluated, because there could be something that can be treated. That was 10 years ago that I had mine. They're a little more sophisticated about treating irregular beats. Sometimes scar tissue can cause an irregular focus in the heart that continues to cause the abnormal beats, that can be treated. If you had a blockage of your coronary vessels, you definitely want to know about it. So yeah, don't sit on it. Go to your doctor, have a cardiologist look at it, but take herbs in addition. And the other side of that, I have a good friend, Dr. Neil Spector, who had a very similar courses to mine. He's a university physician. He kept going back to the doctors. They couldn't find anything. Very late in the game, he was diagnosed with Lyme disease, but by then, his symptoms, his condition was well progressed, and he ended up with a heart transplant. So yeah, this is serious. Lyme disease can destroy your heart. It's definitely something to pay attention to. And so definitely have it evaluated. For me, antibiotics weren't the answer. Herbs were the answer. But I think in the course of things, it's smart to work in conjunction with your doctor and your cardiologist, just to make sure that your condition isn't worsening. Really important for cardiac involvement of Lyme. Next question from Linda. What about colloidal silver, and does it kill spirochetes? Well, there are a lot of things that kill spirochetes, and you can take colloidal silver and dump it into a test tube that contains spirochetes, and it will kill spirochetes. Yeah, so it does kill spirochetes. The other treatment, though, is it a good treatment for Lyme disease? And that one I think is a little bit more difficult. There have been people that have used colloidal silver with success. It does have antimicrobial properties in the body. My problem with silver, though, is it's just pure antibiotic. It doesn't really have any immune enhancing properties, and that's the advantage of the herbs. I think all of the herbs have just as strong of antimicrobial properties as silver, but the herbs, also differentiate between the pathogens and the normal flora, and that's again because we're basically we're boosting our immune system with the plant's biochemical immune system. So it's very, very different than silver. Silver would be more in the class of antibiotic. And we know that silver works, mercury works, all the heavy metals are working. So here on one side, we're going, oh man, we need to eliminate all these heavy metals because they're bad for our health. Well, mercury was used as an antibiotic for years, and it made people desperately sick. Silver isn't quite as bad, but we have no physiologic purpose. We have no use for silver in our body, and it's hard to get rid of, and it does build up. So yes, it might suppress the spirochetes, but yes, you also have a hard time getting rid of it. So I can't personally endorse it. I wouldn't put it down as a high level, just because the herbs work so much better, and there's such a high safety factor. So that's that gets into my 3 points of what you should be doing to evaluate a therapy. There's 3 main questions. What's the potential that it's going to actually have benefit? What is the potential for toxicity of that particular therapy? And what's the cost? So antibiotics, There is there's no antibiotics. There's no evidence that antibiotics work long term to eradicate the microbes. The most they can do is suppress the microbes, but they suppress the normal flora and immune system. So long-term antibiotic therapy doesn't necessarily work, is very expensive and potentially very toxic. Hyperthermia, we talked about that one. It does suppress the microbes, but it also suppresses your immune system. Really expensive, really toxic. Ozone therapy, it does suppress the microbes. It doesn't support your immune system. Really expensive, really toxic. So we can just go on and on and on with a lot of the therapies out there. And then you come around to some other therapies like Rife machines. Rife machines may suppress the microbes, though the evidence of that really doesn't exist in any good form. High cost, but low potential for toxicity. So we come back to the herbs. There's a pretty good evidence. Thousands and thousands and thousands of people have used herbs now with good results over the past 15 years for Lyme disease with very, very good results. Very low cost, extremely low toxicity. So it always comes back to, why in the heck would you not take herbs? I mean, it makes so much sense to do that. It's just something that should not be ignored. So next question from Michelle. How do you prevent repeat tick bite infections? I've had several tick bites this spring. Are there other ways of protecting yourselves and your family member on a continual basis? Well, it's just that thing of being tick paranoid, which I am. And I'll tell you, it hadn't kept me from being in the outdoors, though, because when you look at one of the best things you can do for healing your body, it's getting out in nature and enjoying the outdoors, clean air. There's so many things in a natural environment that boost your immune system and help you live that I certainly don't keep from going outdoors. That being said, there's ticks out there. So I've had ticks on me in the past 10 years, but I haven't been bitten. Knock on wood. It's got to be wood somewhere. So I haven't been bitten, and it's just because I'm ridiculously picky about what I do and how I go about it. I do not go in heavy brush. I do a lot of hiking. I'm a coastal person. I spend a lot of time on the coast, and beaches and water sports are really nice because they don't involve ticks. But I do like to go hiking. I've been to Maine hiking a number of times in the past couple of years. I've been to New England. I've been to North Carolina mountains. I've been to out west. I've been a lot of places where there are ticks. So when I go hiking, I tend to choose trails that are well groomed. So I'm not actually in the foliage. Whether I'm using long pants or short pants, I stop pretty frequently just to check myself for ticks. I tend not to sit down on the ground. If I need to rest, I'll find a clean rock somewhere or something that I'm not actually sitting in any kind of foliage. And for deterrence, I typically use essential oils. The toxicity of the essential oils is very low. Virtually all of the essential oils have some properties. So it's essential oils would be tea tree, eucalyptus, clove, cinnamon, and there are a variety of products out there. They all work pretty well. So you put them on your skin and on your clothes as a deterrent. They don't have the toxicity that some things like DEET has. Some of those things are pretty toxic. I don't use them because they really irritate my skin, and I feel bad. I think they suppress your immune system. So I stay away from them. That being said, if you're a gardener that you're in the foliage, or you're a hunter and you're getting in the foliage, and you're directly where the ticks are, probably DEET is an option, and just being very, very particular about it. So that's that's something, and you've just got to be really particular. So when I go out in the woods, or I'm outside in a tick area, I'm typically checking myself about every 10 or 15 minutes when I come inside. I take my clothes off, shake them really well, out on like a back step or something, and go take a shower and just look top to bottom. Under your arms in pubic area, folds behind your knees. All those areas are the hidden areas are where light ticks to go. Your scalp, your neck, behind your ears, and check your kids too. So I think it's just really, really important to be hyper vigilant about ticks. That being said, tick bites do still happen. The sooner you get them off, the better. There's good evidence that the microbes can be transferred in much less time than the 24 hours that the CDC talked about. There have been a couple of new studies in this past year that showed that 24-hour mark is not accurate, that they can be transferred much faster, and some microbes is within minutes. So every tick bite is suspect. Certainly if you have symptoms, it's important. But beyond that, take the herbs. If I got a tick bite tomorrow, I would just double up on my herbs and keep right on going. And I feel comfortable that would be my best protection. So taking the herbs all the time, taking the herbs continually, I think is important. And kids too, and I think that gets back to a question that I didn't answer completely. Can kids take the herbs? Yes, all of the herbs that we use have a low potential for harm. All the ones that you're going to hear about in the book have a very low potential for harm. Kids can take them. The dosing of an herb is very different than a drug. A drug is potentially a very toxic substance. Basically, most drugs are therapeutically dosed poisons. We're poisoning a pathway in the body to artificially block a symptom or have an effect. Herbs aren't doing that. They're not technically poison, so you don't have the same dose effect. So, so you may have a supplement like ours it's like through 3 capsules of a particular supplement twice a day. Well, you could take 6 or 9 or 12, or you could double the 12 twice a day, and it's probably not going to harm you. So that's even true with kids too. That you can start them low. I always recommend whether it's tinctures or capsules, start a really, really low dose, and then move up and see what that person tolerates until you get a therapeutic effect. So that's what we need to be doing. That's what we need to be doing. So our kids, yes, it's fine to give them the herbs and you just start them slow. A lot of the herbs are bitter, so sometimes you have to mask them in foods or different kinds of drinks. Trying to work on some of those things is hiding these bitter flavors so we can make it available to more kids and more people that just don't like the bitter flavor. So far, the best way we found to do that is the capsules. Some kids can't take the capsules, so you have to open the capsules up into foods. But we found that parents usually have some really creative ways of getting these things into kids. So, all righty. Just where we are doing Facebook live from Raleigh, North Carolina. I'm Dr. Bill Rawls, and we're in the middle of a 3-hour marathon. We're 1 hour and 38 minutes into it. Questions and answers on Lyme disease because it's Lyme Awareness Month. And again, if your question doesn't get answered, please pick up a copy of my book, free giveaway. All you got to do is pay shipping and handling. It's over today. We've had a marathon, and so this is the last day. Midnight tonight is your last chance to pick up the book. Free book, rawlsmd.com is where you find it. All you got to do is pay for shipping. It's a good deal. That is barely covering the shipping and doesn't cover the cost of the book, but we're doing it for Lyme Awareness Month. I think you'd be hard-pressed to find a question that I have not answered in that book. It's definitely worth your reading. Support the Live Lyme Foundation, which is a Lyme awareness group that's really getting the education about what Lyme disease is and how we deal with this thing. And if you want a transcript of this whole thing, you can get it. You give us a little bit of time to build out the transcript, but if you want the whole thing, you can find that at rawlsmd.com/ADR. So all of these things are very, very available. So it's lots of questions out there, a lot of things. We're trying to get as many questions as we can that come from that consolidate a lot of the questions, because we're really getting flooded with questions, and I've got a staff here that's helping me with all of this, and we're creeping through our 3 hours here, and we've covered a lot of topics so far on an awful lot of things. So if you've just joined us, hang in there and ask questions or take a look, and so I'm covering a lot of really important concepts. So quick sip of water and we'll keep moving here. Let's see. So next question is from Tracy. What do you think about 72-hour fasting to reset the immune system to those currently battling chronic illness? It's 72 hours of fasting. And what are we doing there? And the answer is yes, I think it is a reasonable thing as long as you're not struggling too much. All right. So the downside of fasting is it can be a stress on your body. And a lot of times you really do need continuous high quality nutrients to battle the microbes and get ahead. What we're doing with a fast is basically taking a load off of the body, because we devoted a lot of resources to digesting food. And we have a lot of foreign substances come through our intestinal tract. So when you think about it, you got to ask that question, well, what does the digestive system do? What is the purpose of the digestive system? And, we don't think about it this way. We think of, well, what do we want to eat? What tastes good? And we tend to be driven by the things that taste good. But you really have to come around and say, well, what are we trying to do with digestion? Why do we eat? What is food doing? It's nourishing our cells. When you look at us, cells are the most basic building block of all living things. So we are a composite of 10 trillion cells, and each one of those cells has a different purpose. So the purpose of each cell in the body is supporting all the other cells in the body. So the cells in our gastrointestinal tract have the job of extracting from food all that junk we put in our body, extracting the specific nutrients that each of our cells need to function. And then we need our cardiovascular system to carry those nutrients and spread it out to all the individual cells in the body. So, our body needs carbohydrates, but in low concentrations. One of the things is we overload our body with with simple carbohydrates, and it's more than our cells can possibly use. We eat bad fats, and fats are really important not only as an energy source, but the way they're incorporated into our cell membranes. All the cell membranes in our body are made of fat. So your cell membranes define what comes in and out of the cell. You're eating too much saturated fat or fats with free radicals that are been oxidized, refined oils. You're going to put those bad fats in your cell membranes in your body, and your cells aren't going to work as well. Simple as that. And then there's just all the junk in food that our cells don't need, all the fiber and all the microbes and all the stuff. So our digestive system has to pull all of that stuff out of this stuff we call food and get it to our cells. And it's a really energy intensive process. And there's lots of things that are foreign to us that come through our through our intestinal tract. So 70% of the immune system is in the intestinal tract, because of all of this foreign junk that comes through in our food. Well, when you fast for 72 hours, you basically get rid of all that. And it takes a lot of pressure off your immune system, and it reduces your energy requirement of your body, so your immune system can focus on getting you well. Now, that being said, if you don't have any nourishment coming in, if you do too long, or if your cells are already struggling and they're starving, then you're going to starve them more. So it can work against you. So if your reserves are really low, you've got to be very, very careful about how you do a fast when you're chronically ill, because it can actually work against you. So for most people, what we try to do is start them off on a really, really clean diet. And if you want to do some fasting, you can do a full 72-hour fast. You can do intermittent fasting, which is something I try to do, where you try to cut your window of eating down to 6 hours or 12 hours during the day. So 6 hours a day, you wouldn't eat anything after 6 at night or 7 at night, and you wouldn't eat anything before 7 in the morning. Or 6 hours, you'd wait and not eat until after lunch, and then cut it off before 6 in the evening. So that's another way to do fasting. And it just reduces the time that your body has to focus on that very difficult task of digesting food and extracting those nutrients. But we put people on a really clean diet, high vegetables, nutrient-dense, calorie-sparse food. So it's getting all the nutrients that the cells need without overloading the body with toxins and with the things that stress it and stress the immune system. So I think however you go about it for chronic illness, you do have to change your diet. A processed food diet, high meat diets are really, really difficult to digest. So it's the vegetables. Your diet should be more than half vegetables. In the early stages, it should be all cooked vegetables, so that you can, so that all of this stuff can get through your system and nourish your cells properly. So it's a matter of shifting away from thinking, well, what's good, what tastes good, to how can I best nourish my cells to help restore me while I'm chronically ill, so I can get back to a normal life. So that's really important to think about as we're moving through. So 72-hour fasting is fine if your reserves are high enough to tolerate it. Be careful, moderate it. You can do an altered fast where you're just eating cooked vegetables in low in counts, juice fast. You want to get as much in the way of nutrients as you can to your body without all the stuff in there that your body doesn't really need. So, all right. Question from Ann. I'm 2 weeks into taking doxycycline, and symptoms have been getting worse and even more debilitating. I think it's a Herxheimer reaction. Typically, how long does this continue? That's really highly variable. Basically, the Herxheimer reaction, in the most basic definition, is that when you take some therapy, antibiotic, antimicrobial herb, or anything else is killing microbes, then the particles, the dead bacteria, the particles are very sensitizing to the immune system. And so you end up with inflammation, and then it causes whole body symptoms, muscle aches, feeling terrible, just intensifies all the Lyme symptoms, basically. And so that's the classic definition, but I think it goes even beyond that, that it's not just the killing of the bacteria. So I like to think of it as a small war going on. When you have these microbes, when you have a chronic infection, as I said, your immune system is struggling. You've got all these stress factors that have affected your immune system. Now the microbes are flourishing, and I liken it to a pot boiling over. So you got this whole thing that's just boiling over in your system. And you've got this war going on between your immune system and the microbes. And if you're symptomatic, the microbes are basically winning. When you introduce therapies that are killing microbes, you're basically intensifying that war. Basically the microbes are going to be fighting back harder. The immune system is going to be disrupted even more. So that can actually intensify the symptoms. What we find is that herbs typically cause lower immune reactions and lower Herxheimer's than antibiotics, but anything that kills microbes or intensifies that war can cause symptoms. So things that you can do about it, one, you can back off on therapy, either stop the therapy and restart it again later, or just back off the intensity of it. A lot of people do that. Take anti-inflammatory herbs like turmeric that can be really nice. Clear your system. And your immune system is basically getting clogged up. There are herbs, like there's one called red root, that's really nice for clearing your lymphatic system that can be helpful. I actually recently created a detox product that flushes the lymphatics, flushes the kidneys. It does a lot more than most of your detox products on the market, but it goes beyond. So all of those things, and they will gradually get better. I think all of us that have been through this thing have experienced them. Some people, they're worse than others, but pretty much everybody has it one way or another at one time or another. But sometimes it's hard to tell, is it a Herxheimer? Is it a relapse? Is it food sensitivities? So all of these things can cause these kinds of symptoms. And so typically a Herxheimer reaction occurs after you've initiated a new therapy. But it can occur after you've been on a therapy for a long time, even an herb for a long, long time. You start, just your symptoms start coming back. That can be a bacterial relapse, or it can be that something's clobbered your immune system again, I mean, I had a lot of relapses during my recovery, and I got really good at troubleshooting. I'd go down the list, and it's like, okay, why am I having this relapse? Have I become tolerant to the herb? Do I need to change my set of herbs? And sometimes that was really helpful. Have I been under unusual stress? Have I been sleeping properly? Have I changed my diet? Is it a new food sensitivity? So I just go down the list and troubleshoot. And inevitably, I got really good at finding out why I was having these. So I was able to cut the relapses short quicker before it became bad, and recover faster, and got to the point that I had fewer relapses, and they didn't kick me as bad. I didn't fall down flat on my face as much as I did in the beginning. And I still, I'm 61 years old. I consider myself in normal health, and things still get you. I mean, I know if I get way stressed out again, or go for nights without sleeping or traveling and things like that, it's going to knock me down a little bit, and I'm going to have to be careful about that. And that's just a simple fact of life. So that the more you do it, the better. All right, I see one other question. I'm going to do one question off the board, and then I'll come back to this one. All right. There's somebody asked, how about low-dose naltrexone use? That's a quick one just to cover. Low-dose naltrexone is a drug. Naltrexone was a drug that was designed to treat heroin addiction. It basically blocks all the effects of the opioid drugs. And it is very effective in doing that, but it wasn't as effective for heroin addiction because people would just start using the drug and go back to the heroin. So they developed other drugs like methadone that had effects like heroin, but would block some of the effects too. So it got sidelined as a drug, but somebody found that if you took about 5 or 10% of the total dose, you temporarily block opioid receptors in the body, and there's a rebound of opioids. So it's kind of a way you can treat and get more endorphins, generate more endorphins in your body. So it has the same effect of exercising. So if you're in a position of not being able to exercise, you could low dose naltrexone and boost your endorphins. Endorphins are really important for helping your immune system rebound. So I think moving is really, really important. But for the people who can't move, low dose naltrexone can be beneficial. It has to be done through a doctor. It comes from compounding pharmacies, which right now the FDA and other groups are trying to eliminate compounding pharmacies, which provide an awful lot of great services in the world. But pharmaceutical companies don't like compounding pharmacies because that's competition. And so there's a move. So write your congressman and protect your compounding pharmacies, because that's the only way you'll get low-dose naltrexone. I think it's valuable. My experience in my practice, I used it with patients, and it was about 50-50. About 50% of people would get a mild to moderate effect, and other people got nothing from it. And occasionally it would actually make them worse. So I don't think it's as good as the herbs. Money and time investment, I think the herbs are better, but some people do have benefits. So I just wanted to touch on that. But again, there are a lot of things that are produced by compounding pharmacies that are really wonderful. And your compounding pharmacies, your right to use a compounding pharmacy is under assault. So write your congressman and speak out on that one. I think that's something that's important. So from Tina Marie, since Borrelia requires collagen for survival, am I feeding Borrelia if I'm using collagen, and parentheses, from grass-fed cows every day? Or am I giving them a different source which may in fact preserve my own collagen? Yeah, that's a question that gets asked a lot. And that are we actually, if we take collagen, are we just growing more microbes? And the answer is no. I think everybody. This is another just misunderstanding about the whole chronic Lyme disease thing. So when you look at a microbial infection, so look at something like a pneumonia, you've got a high concentration of microbes causing illness at one location, that they're consolidated and they're actually doing damage to tissue from the fast bacterial growth. And they're basically growing in that area because the immune system can't contain that thing. So that's very different than chronic Lyme disease. So what you have in chronic Lyme disease is very low concentrations of intercellular microbes dispersed to all tissues in the body, not concentrated anywhere. So if you had a patient with all the symptoms of chronic Lyme disease with a positive test for Borrelia, and you started biopsying their joints and their deeper tissues all throughout the body, what you would find is a range of microbes in the tissues. And we're seeing some of these studies now. You wouldn't just find Borrelia, you would find that there were low concentrations of a range of microbes, not just the Borrelia. But you'd be hard pressed to find the Borrelia because it's in such low concentrations. So what's happening here again is your immune system is depressed, so these things are flourishing. And what they're doing is they're wanting resources. So collagen is a resource. So they're trying to generate inflammation to break down tissues so they can get at collagen. All right. So if you heard my mycoplasma discussion before, that's a big one that's in joints, is mycoplasma. A mycoplasma bacteria is about 1,000 times bigger, smaller than a cell. than one of our cells. They're really, really tiny. So you're talking about really low concentrations of microbes. So it's not the microbe as much that's causing the problem as it is the tug of war with the immune system that's causing the inflammation. So when you take collagen, basically all you're doing is what you're doing with that is you're giving the body resources to rebuild the collagen that's been broken down, the inflammation. You're not feeding the microbes. So you're really not changing the concentration of the microbes. You're giving your body the resources it needs to heal itself. So it is important to get good nutrition, and collagen can be a part of that nutrition. Now, that being said, when you take a collagen supplement, basically just you're giving your body a good source of amino acids, because most all of that is broken down and has to be rebuilt. So you don't have to take collagen. Any good amino acid source, any healthy protein source is going to give you the range of amino acids that you need. Taking collagen itself provides some other things like silicon and other kinds of stuff that are part of the collagen that is just helpful for rebuilding the collagen. But it's really important to recognize that it's that you're not feeding the microbes. You're just giving your body resources to help it take care of itself. The solution to the problem is doing something like herbal therapy and all the support things to suppress the microbes and support immune system function. So that's all really, really important. That's all really important. Yes, so collagen supplements are just fine. You don't have to buy a really expensive collagen supplement. You can take gelatin. It works. You can take bone broth. Most all of the companies that make any kind of broth make bone broth now. It's inexpensive. I buy it in the little flasks, and I drink bone broth pretty regularly. It's very pleasant, but you don't need to spend tons of money on a bone broth or a collagen supplement to get good sources of collagen. All right, how do you address heavy metals, particularly if you are told they are deeper in the body, like in the bones and within the cells? Yeah, I think that states it right there. They are deeper in the body, in the bones, and within cells. And these protocols where people are being slammed with chelating agents or binding agents to rip the heavy metals out of their body, I think do more harm than good. So I'm not a big fan of that. Taking protocols for taking supplements, or even worse, IV chelation that is pulling heavy metals out of the body. So first of all, in answer to that, we're all exposed to heavy metals now, and we have been for a long time. So heavy metals actually come mostly from coal. We've been mining coal and using it for producing energy for about 3,000 years. That started in China 3,000 years ago, and it spread worldwide. When you take matter, organic matter, and squeeze it inside the earth under heavy pressure, you not only change the hydrocarbons and make them very compact, as you would in coal and petroleum, but you also squeeze heavy metals and other inorganic substances into that. So when you burn these things, you blow all the heavy metals and everything out into the atmosphere. So when you look at history, heavy metals and other things from the environment, they weren't nearly as prevalent before 3,000 years ago when humans started burning coal so much. So now there are heavy metals everywhere. Heavy metals precipitate in the air. They precipitate out in streams. They end up in our water. They get carried out in the oceans, and they get concentrated up the food chain. So the bigger animals you're eating, the higher concentrations of heavy metals you're getting. Big fish out in the ocean, like tuna, have a lot higher concentration of heavy metals because it's been concentrated in their bodies up through the food chain. So you can imagine that larger animals like pigs and cows are going to have more heavy metals in their bodies than chickens or small fish that you catch inland. So it's that food chain phenomenon. So that's where heavy metals come from. How much harm heavy metals do is really undefined. There are a lot of people that are robustly healthy walking around with significant levels of heavy metals in our body. But it is true, if your system is working properly, you will purge heavy metals and get them out of your body better than if your systems have been compromised. Your body is remarkably good at purging itself of things that you don't need, including heavy metals. So it will purge heavy metals if you are healthy. Therefore, when you find people in a state of compromised health, that they have chronic immune dysfunction and chronic Lyme and all these things that come with it, their ability to remove heavy metals from their deeper tissues is compromised. So part of the solution is just that protocol of wellness, of all of the herbs and all of the things that we do to help support our bodies to get us well. And I know you're hearing me say this over and over and over and over again, and that's because it's so remarkably key. So getting rid of heavy metals beyond that is one of the best ways to do it is sweating. And one of the best modalities of doing that is infrared sauna. So the data that I've looked at shows that infrared sauna is probably the best way to reduce the heavy metals concentrations in your body. And it's really important for doing that. So any kind of sweating. So if you're at a level that you can get out and exercise regularly enough to work up a good sweat, you're going to knock out some heavy metals. You're going to reduce your concentration of heavy metals in your body. So I think that's an important part of this whole thing, is moving as blood flow gets to those deeper tissues. It moves those heavy metals out of our body. And the herbs in general are enhancing all the detoxification pathways in the body. Enhancing liver function is really good for helping remove all of your organic and or inorganic toxins. So the herbs are really good for that. Herbs that promote liver function, like dandelion and milk thistle and all these others, are really important. But I think those things are more important than abruptly trying to chelate the heavy metals. Other things that are really nice for removing primarily organic toxins are chlorella. Cilantro is really nice for that. So again, lots of cilantro in your diet, but chlorella is a freshwater algae that's just extremely good for reducing the load of organic toxins. It may help with heavy metals some, but I think sweating is your better way to go. So a lot of people gain a lot of benefit from infrared sauna. But again, it's that gradual movement of the heavy metals out of your body and restoring the ability of your body to take care of itself is really important. That's something that I think we've been all trained to do by our conventional medical system. Our conventional medical system all but ignores the healing systems of our body. Our body is very, very good at taking care of itself. And when we're chronically ill, it means that it has lost capacity to do that, and it's overly stressed. So if you reduce the stress factors, you're going to restore that ability, and you're going to restore your health. Our conventional medical model ignores all of that and basically says we're going to hit you with this drug or this procedure or this thing that's going to fix you, and it's always artificial, and it never results in wellness, never. So I think it's very important to look at those aspects of the whole thing. The other thing is people that have mercury in their mouth, teeth. And I can tell you that I have had some people that have had mercury in their mouths and have gone to specialized dentists and had the mercury fillings removed and replaced with basically plastic fillings. And they have gotten better. But it's a slippery slope. There's not a lot of evidence looking at this one way or another. of how much the actual heavy metals are holding us back. And the problem is, it can be really, really toxic to get these mercury fillings out of your mouth. And it's appearing that the plastic they're putting in replace of them, it can be as toxic as the mercury fillings themselves, or ceramics, or their various components, their various substances they're using, but they can be potentially as toxic as the mercury. So it's not an easy question to answer. And when somebody comes to me and says, I'm sick, I've got chronic Lyme, I've got these heavy metals, I've got these metal fillings in my mouth, should I have them removed? Generally, what my advice is, try to do everything you can first. Take the herbs, restore the ability of your body to take care of itself, boost your immune system functions, do all of those things first. And then if you're not getting to the level of health that you want to achieve, then consider going for having the metals taken out of your mouth. But be really careful about it. Just be really, really careful. So that's never the first thing on my list. So, yep, for sure. All right. 2 hours and 10 minutes. 50 minutes to go, y'all. From Emily. Can you advise what to do for hair loss? My Lyme symptoms are pretty much all under control after doing the protocol for 1 to 2 years. Hooray, good. But my hair loss continues unabated. Hair loss isn't one thing, it's many things, all right? And it's so it depends on where the hair loss is coming in your body, and it can occur for various reasons. So your hair follicles are very, very sensitive to chronic illness and therapies and everything else. And basically, like the hair on top of your head, the hair follicles, most of your hair follicles are actually in a resting phase. So a hair will produce a hair for a good while and eventually stop and take a rest for a while, go into a resting phase, and then it'll start producing again later. And what we find with chronic illness is, and I've seen an awful lot of people that have this, is that in chronic illness, your body just basically isn't working as well. And so it takes a break. And so a lot more of your hair follicles go into a resting phase. So if you're having general hair loss of all the hair on your body and all the hair on your head, that's probably what's going on. And there can be a lag of several years before those hairs start being synchronized and start producing a hair follicle again. So I've seen it, most people, it comes back. Now, that being said, there are other things that there's an autoimmune condition that you can get patches of hair loss. And I've forgotten the name of it. You caught me on that one. It's alopecia. Forgot. Probably come to me. But there's patches of hair loss, and it's an autoimmune condition. And what I found is those people is it's a sign of chronic immune dysfunction. So when you restore normal immune functions, and I've actually had some people with this on our protocol, that they get better and the hair comes back. So that autoimmune condition with hair loss. And then there's male pattern baldness that starts right on the top of your head, and that can occur in women also. It's more hormonally related, and it is age related. So it can occur in women, and so it can be accentuated. So chronic illness can accentuate that in both males and females. So if it's more specifically that male pattern baldness, That one's a little harder to address. There are drugs, there are surgeries, there are different kinds of things that you can do that address it. Blocking dehydroxytestosterone in the hair follicles can help. That's what most of the drugs do. But there are things in nature that can do that. So it's saw palmetto that's used for prostate is one of the things that blocks DHT, dehydroxyprogesterone, or testosterone, and that can help. It blocks an enzyme, and that blocks conversion of testosterone into this active form in the hair follicle. So saw palmetto, and there's some other herbs too that can be beneficial for that. But just restoring your health, and what I can tell you is, when I was in the thick of things, in my early 50s, I had more pronounced baldness, more thinning in my head than I do now. It's really stabilized, and I've gotten a little bit back. It's just years of doing herbs, and so it's something that it's male pattern baldness, both in men and women. It's more pronounced in men. Is just part of life, and some people are more prone to it than others. But it's but just being healthy, you're going to get it the best that it can be. But again, that whole hair loss that most people are experiencing will tend to get better with time. You just have to wait for it. Yep, you just have to wait for it. All right. Once again, we are 2 hours and 15 minutes into our big Lyme question and answer marathon here. We've got 45 more minutes. And don't forget, if your question hasn't been answered, then we're having a book giveaway. My book, Unlocking Lyme, is really, I set out to answer as many questions as I possibly could. Most things that people ask are in there. Very, very worthwhile. All you have to do is go to my website, /RawlsND/ADR. Code is free book. All you got to do is pay shipping and handling, and we'll have a book headed your way with lots of information. That giveaway is up tonight. Support the Live Lyme Foundation, a really good charity that is increasing Lyme awareness. So we need all of that we can get. And if you want the whole thing, the transcript of this entire 3 hours, just go to my website, rawlsnd.com/ADR, and all that information will be coming your way. Very good. So, so winding down the last 45 minutes here. All right. The question I was waiting for, the big hot one right now. What is the effectiveness of CBD oil, and what symptoms can it help with most? So you're hearing a lot about cannabis out there. There's a lot of debate right now. Heard in the news yesterday that New Jersey is getting ready to wanting to legalize recreational marijuana. So cannabis, both medical marijuana and the other side of cannabis, hemp. So both of these are versions of the plant or varieties of the plant Cannabis sativa. And one version, one variety, marijuana, has high levels of a substance called THC. At the other end of the spectrum, the variety of cannabis called hemp has high levels of CBD. So what's the difference in these two things out there? So, well, first of all, when you talk about cannabis, you're talking about an herb. It is a medicinal herb in every way that you look at it. So it's not just the THC and CBD, it's a range of other chemicals, including terpenes and all kinds of other things that have some pretty remarkable health benefits. So what are we doing? We're we're affecting a system in the body that has been named the endocannabinoid system because they didn't know it existed until they started looking at these things in cannabis. So they named it after that. So anytime you've got any substance that's having an effect in the body, it's hitting receptors. It's mimicking things that are already there. So we actually all have endocannabinoids that these things, CBD and THC, are affecting the receptors. So one of the most well-known, we have a lot of them, but one is anandamide. So we all have something called anandamide in our body. And anandamide and the endocannabinoid system basically oversee or regulate everything in the body. They affect our mood, they affect our immune system, they affect pain. They basically modulate all these things. So they have a broad-reaching effect that's affecting an awful lot of different things in the body. And so it's so what we're doing when we take this marijuana or hemp extracts from cannabis is we're affecting the endocannabinoid system. So anandamide, again, is the main neurotransmitter, and that comes from the Sanskrit word ananda, which means bliss. So if you've got normal anandamide levels, you feel pretty well balanced. You basically feel good. Everything in your body is working properly, and it's overseeing everything in your body. So if you are with chronic illness, then your anandamide levels get suppressed, and your whole endocannabinoid system becomes dysfunctional. So what are we doing with THC? Well, with THC, we bind to anandamide receptors really, really, really tightly. So you get this exaggerated or euphoric response. You feel really good. And that's okay if you want to use it occasionally recreationally, but it's not as good medicinally because THC actually suppresses your normal anandamide levels and suppresses your endocannabinoid receptors. So using it chronically, you get habituated to it, and it reduces the medicinal properties of it. Going at the other end of the spectrum, CBD. What have we got with that? Well, that substance acts very differently. It doesn't bind to anandamide receptors nearly as tightly, not even as tightly as anandamide, but it does other things that boost our natural levels of anandamide and also boost our endocannabinoid receptors. So if our endocannabinoid system is not working well, it helps our anandamide system, our endocannabinoid system, work better. It balances it, smooths it out. So CBD isn't habituating, it doesn't cause euphoria, and it really has a wonderful balancing effect on all systems in the body. So it can affect a lot of different things in a wonderful way. It can reduce pain, but not as much as a narcotic. It can improve sleep, but not with the potency of a sleep drug. It can reduce anxiety, but not with the potency of something like Xanax. So here you're talking about a modulating effect or an indirect effect, not a direct effect. So that has the effect of balancing everything in the body. So that's really, really nice for helping out a lot of different symptoms in the body. The nice thing about CBD is you can do it without concerns for habituation, without concerns for euphoria. And so it, to me, makes a really, really nice medicinal. And it's good for a lot of different things. So it can be good for pain. You can use it as a rub for joint pain. It's good for so many different things. But it is really important to get a good product that has the full potency of the other chemicals called terpenes that are basically the same things you find in essential oils, that you're getting beneficial effects, immune enhancing effects, a little bit of antimicrobial effect. So I wouldn't say that CBD from hemp is a treatment for Lyme disease, but it's a really nice adjunct to all the other herbs that you might be using for Lyme disease. So the average starting dose is like 15 milligrams of CBD, but that can go up Some people, to control symptoms, may need doses even in the hundreds. I think the whole herb extract, the full spectrum CBD with all the terpenes, is more important and more valuable than isolated CBD. There are CBD isolate drugs out there now, have to use really high doses, and they have more of a drug-like effect. And it's very artificial. It doesn't work like the herb that balances your whole system. So you need higher doses and therefore more side effects. So I think that in this case, the herb is actually much better than the drugs. And then as far as medicinal marijuana, you get a little more potency if you add a little bit of THC in there as far as controlling symptoms like anxiety and also pain. The problem with it, as soon as you start adding THC, though, you're going to increase the potential for tolerance and habituation. So in my opinion, CBD is the safer option, and for long-term use, the better option. So I'm a real fan of CBD oil, and I think it's a really nice adjunct to chronic Lyme therapy. Really, really a good one. So let's see, moving on. So next question, essential oils, good. Kent, what do you think of essential oil protocols to help Lyme disease? So what are essential oils? I think we have to ask that question first. We've talked a lot about herbs, and I talked about the full spectrum of hundreds of chemicals in every herb. So what we're doing with herbs with most herbal therapy is we're using water alcohol extracts most commonly. So we're pulling some of the oils, but also all of the water-soluble substances from the plant. So we're basically getting that full spectrum. I like to think of it as we're taking the biochemistry. The plant is using biochemical solutions for its immune system and to solve a lot of problems, and we're basically taking that full spectrum and we're putting it in us to boost our systems, to boost our immune system. So what is the essential oil? Well, the essential oils, plants make oils and they put them in little vacuoles or little blebs inside the leaves and inside the stem, and they release them to basically protect themselves against microbes and insects. So that's what the plant is doing. So it's not part of the circulation of the plant as much as it's part of that exterior protective mechanism. So what you find with essential oils is they're a lot more potent than the chemicals that we're pulling out for an herbal product, and potentially a lot more harsh. They do have strong antimicrobial properties, but the problem with them is they are also very harsh to your system. So you have to be really careful with them. The main place that I see the essential oils as being valuable is rubs, and we're using them in combination with CBD to rub on joints. And we talked about, maybe that arthritis is actually low levels of microbes in the joint. So we're adding some not only anti-inflammatory properties to the joints, but some direct immune enhancing and microbe suppressing properties directly in that area. These chemicals are absorbed well. But again, they're potentially toxic. The most antimicrobial herbs, the most antimicrobial essential oils are also the very most toxic. So top of the list of the strong antimicrobial herbs are clove, cinnamon, cassia, which is a form of cinnamon, eucalyptus is pretty strong, thyme and oregano that has thymol in it. So those are some really strong chemicals. The problem with them is if you rub them on your skin, they'll burn your skin. And if you take them internally, they'll definitely burn your intestines. So you have to be really careful with them. There are other essential oils that are better to put on skin that have milder antimicrobial properties. Now, all of them are going to have some antimicrobial properties, but tea tree, lavender, frankincense, some of those oils. Helichrysum is a really nice restorative oil. Those are going to have less potent antimicrobial properties, and you can use them on your skin. So typically, most joint rubs are going to have predominantly some of the oils that don't burn skin, and a little bit of clove, cassia, cinnamon, some of the stronger antimicrobials. Now, I have explored and taken myself, because I wanted to get the full spectrum of things, and I talk about this in the book too, using essential oils for Lyme therapy. And there are protocols out there, you can find them on the internet, where you take those really strong herbs, the cassia, the clove, and all the strong ones, and you put like a drop of them on the little plastic capsules. You can buy the capsules over the internet. The powdered oil, the powdered supplements come in, and you just get the empty capsule, and you put drops of each one of the essential oils, and you take that internally. And I actually did that, and I found pretty quickly that it irritated my gut. So I think it's effective, but I think it's potentially really, really potent. And what I would always recommend is try all your herbal protocols first. And if for some reason they're not working and nothing else is working, then essential oils. It gets down to those three things that I talk about. Look at what's the potential for benefit, what's the potential for harm, and what's the cost. So comparing, and herbs are really the thing that's at the top of my list always, because thousands and thousands of people have gotten benefit from herbs for Lyme disease and a lot of chronic illnesses. There's a very, very low potential for harm, and the cost is very low. Comparatively, essential oils, there is some evidence. There is published evidence on the internet. You're not going to find any studies. You will find test tube studies using the essential oils and showing they have antimicrobial properties. That's not a problem. All of that is out there. But there's very, very limited evidence of people using them for Lyme disease. People have reported benefit. There's no doubt about it. But you got that second thing, and they don't cost very much. The cost of essential oils is pretty low, because you're just using a drop at a time. But there's a really high potential for toxicity, especially to the gut. So my preference is to use them more topically. I think that's where you're going to get your best therapy. But I think that's if you choose to do some of the other internal protocols, be really, really, really careful. You can really hurt yourself there. And I don't think you're going to get much support from very many physicians on that one. So, all right, winding down here. My voice is still hanging in there. Thank you. From Robert, why do you think it's taking the mainstream medicine so long to acknowledge the Lyme epidemic? And are you seeing more research being done on chronic Lyme and into possible cures? The answer is because fundamentally, the mainstream medical community doesn't understand chronic illness at all. If you understand chronic Lyme disease, you understand chronic illness, and our mainstream medical community doesn't understand that. And if you don't understand it, it's really hard to research it. But there's a lot more research coming. And when we talk about that word cure, I think we're implying that we're killing off the microbes. I don't think that's possible, and that's what the research is going to show. And why do we need? What we need to be doing is looking at the extraordinary benefit of herbs. So I'd like to see a lot more research on herbs, not just the antimicrobial properties, but their restorative property. So again, what any of us want in life is a symptom-free state. We all want a reasonable life. We want a good life expectancy, and we want to live that life symptom-free. And I can tell you, for the past 40 years, I've been living with symptoms, and now at age 61, have finally gotten to a point of enjoying life without symptoms. So that's what we're talking about here, and I think it's really important. Is there a Lyme epidemic? Is Lyme disease spreading? It's not. It's not. Borrelia, the microbe that's commonly associated with Lyme disease, research has shown that it's actually been in North America for over 60,000 years. It was found in the in a human that thawed out of a glacier that's 5,300 years old in the Italian Alps. And what's really interesting is this guy, he was in his 40s. He was murdered. He had an arrow in the back. He had gut parasites because, and he had arthritis. But he was crossing the Alps. He didn't have Lyme disease, all right? He was carrying this microbe. This microbe has been found in amber in the Dominican Republic, down in the Caribbean now. It's been found inside a tick in amber that's 15 million years old. So what that tells me is Lyme disease has been around as long as ticks have been biting humans, and ticks have been biting humans ever since there have been humans. So this thing is not new. It has been here. It is endemic. It has always been part of us. Humans didn't just start being bitten by ticks in 1976 and getting Lyme disease. This EM rash has been reported for hundreds of years. Ticks, Borrelia has always been part of that. And the biggest evidence of that is that people don't get acutely ill from Lyme disease most of the time. The more your immune system is familiar with a microbe, the less apt you are to get an acute infection. And people typically don't get severe infections from Lyme disease, from Borrelia. So that in itself says that this microbe is well known by our immune system. What we're having a problem with and why we're seeing so much of Lyme disease is, one, awareness, and two, because we're living in the age of chronic immune dysfunction. We've got stress factors that are disrupting our immune system, hitting us from every angle. It's the food we eat. It's the toxins that we're exposed to. And the concentration of insidious toxins in our environment, in our water, in our air, in our food is higher than it's ever been. In the chronic stress we live under, sitting in front of the computer all day. And I do enough of that. And I try to break it up by going out and walking or riding a bike or something. All these things are important. So if you get these microbes in your system, and your immune system gets disrupted by all these factors, you're going to get chronic illness. So it's not just chronic Lyme. Again, when I look at chronic Lyme disease, I think it's a model for all chronic illness. It's a model for everything. So we're starting, they've extracted Borrelia from Alzheimer's patients. They've extracted Borrelia from Parkinson's patients. They've extracted Borrelia from multiple sclerosis, along with mycoplasma, and chlamydia, and Epstein-Barr, and all these other microbes that are activated. They've extracted Borrelia from glioblastoma multiforme. What is that? That's a cancer that killed John McCain. Now, not particularly his case, but I just saw research that there have been 5 cases where they extracted Borrelia from this particular tumor. 18% of cancers worldwide now are directly associated with a link to these intercellular microbes, not Borrelia, but Epstein-Barr, chlamydia, all of these different microbes, toxoplasma that so many of us get. So it's out there. So getting back to that question of why the mainstream medicine doesn't understand it is because we're still practicing the same way we were practicing 100 years ago. I'm 4th generation doing this. My great-grandfather was a horse and buggy doctor. My grandfather was a country doctor. And I can tell you, I used to go on house calls with him, and there were sickly people out there. And he only had anything to offer to those people if they were acutely ill, because that's what drugs do. They act acutely. Surgery acts acutely. You have trauma or an appendicitis, you go to the doctor, you have something done acutely. You have a heart attack, we can help you. We do exceptionally good job at treating acute illness. But we try to apply those same acute tools to treating chronic illness. It's very complicated and it's very problematic when you look at trying to pay for all of that. So when we look at illness, I say this all the time, it's a matter of two different questions, of asking how someone is ill versus why someone is ill. In the conventional medical system, we ask how they are ill. And what I mean by that is we ask what processes are going wrong in the body and how can we artificially manipulate those processes to get rid of whatever symptom that process is causing. So if you've got an acute illness, you're typically talking about one insult, a trauma, a pneumonia, something that's very easily addressable. And when you address that acute insult, the healing, the status quo of the body returns to normal and the person gets back to health. When you're talking about chronic illness, you're talking about everything going wrong in the body all at once. Immune dysfunction, microbes flourishing, everything's falling apart. So typically, when you have multiple symptoms, you end up with a drug for every symptom, and every drug has a toxic side effect, but that's the only tools we have. Conventional medicine has tools and surgical technology. That's it. And that goes back to 1932 when the American Medical Association put out a decree that to keep a license, physicians would have to limit their practice to drugs and surgery. So all research into electrical therapies, herbal therapies, everything else stopped cold at that point. And it's been suppressed ever since. So we have to fundamentally change our thinking. So when you ask why someone is ill, why are those things dysfunctional in the body? What's disrupting those processes? You come back to those same elements. It's what they're eating, there's toxins they're exposed to, it's the stress they're under, and it's the microbes flourishing in their tissues. It's really limited. And what disease someone gets depends on how those functions are disrupted, their genetic background, because we're all susceptible to some diseases more than others, and what spectrum of microbes they pick up. So if someone never gets bitten by a tick and never picks up Borrelia and Bartonella and all of these things, then they're going to be a lot better off than some other people. But it's like New York City. New York City will always have criminals. You need a strong police force to keep them contained. Same thing. We have pathogens in our body. Every single person does. So you've got to control that. You have to have a healthy immune system. So that's fundamentally what's wrong with our system. We have to change the way that we're looking at it, and we have to change the tools that we use. Our system creates dependence, and patients remain passive. You go in there and you sit in front of the doctor, and you basically are considered to have no knowledge, and you take whatever the doctor hands you. And we need to move to a system that promotes independence of patients and promotes proactivity and empowers people to take responsibility of their own health. And that's what this marathon is really all about. And that's why I wrote Unlocking Lyme, is to empower people to take charge of their own health and their own destiny and their own well-being, because that's ultimately what's going to get you back to where you need to be. So here we are, last 17 minutes of our 3-hour marathon question and answer Facebook Live for Lyme disease. And again, you can get that book free, Unlocking Lyme. I loaded it with information, rawls.com/ADR, the code FREEBOOK. That'll get you a book for all you got to pay is the shipping and handling. It's the best deal you're ever going to get in Lyme disease, I promise. And it will help you more if you take the time to read it than anything else you can do. Support the Live Lyme Foundation, really important for Lyme awareness. And if you missed some of this and you want all this information, the transcript will be available at rawlsmd.com/ADR. So winding up the last little bit here. Question from Priscilla. What helps fatigue? Yeah, that's always a first question. And that was something I struggled with for years, just that just feeling like something was pressing you down, like you were experiencing twice as much gravity as any other person on the planet, and your whole body was weighted down, and it was just this gnawing feeling of not having energy. And it's really frustrating. And it's basically a symptom of chronic illness in general. It's part of chronic Lyme disease, but also fibromyalgia. Really, any of the chronic illness symptoms, you're going to find fatigue. And it's basically a sign that everything in the body isn't working properly. So it's if your body is not working properly, then you're going to experience fatigue as one of the primary symptoms. So getting back to what the body is, we are a collection of 10 trillion cells. Every cell in the body has to be properly nourished. The purpose of every cell in the body is taking care of all the other cells in the body. That's what cells do. So you've got skin cells that hold moisture in your body, and you got heart cells that pump blood, and cells that line your vascular system to move that blood to nourish the cells, and cells in your lungs to extract oxygen, and cells in your digestive tract to extract all the nutrients that your cells need from food. So it's this one for all and all for one situation that cells are working for themselves. Now, all of the functions of those cells have to be coordinated. So that's what we have all these chemical messengers for: hormones and neurotransmitters and nervous system. Everything in the body has to be coordinated for all of these cells to work properly. So if conditions aren't being coordinated, cells aren't getting the nutrients they need, they're being starved of oxygen, then you're going to naturally be fatigued. So there's no dose of caffeine that is going to correct that. There's no drug on earth that treats fatigue. We may be treating the symptom of fatigue by artificially boosting the energy systems and basically raising adrenaline in our body. Caffeine is basically acting like adrenaline. So we override fatigue when we have to do that fight or flight response. It gets us going. So if long ago, if you had been fatigued, your body was stressed, and a tiger came from around the corner, or a bear, your adrenaline is going to pump up, and you're going to be able to find that energy you didn't know you have and get moving. But it's short-lived, because you're just basically draining all your reserves even faster. And that's what you're doing by trying to treat fatigue with caffeine. So you got to be really careful about that. So any things that drive the body harder are going to actually make it worse. The best treatment for fatigue is restoring the body's ability to work in synchrony, for all the cells to be nourished properly. So good food. To reduce stress, so all the hormonal messengers are balanced. CBD is really great for fatigue because it helps balance all those pathways. So doing things that increase balance. The herbs that I talked about to balance the HPA axis are really important for helping fatigue, because they help balance those systems. They help coordinate all the cellular functions in the body. So CBD, the herbs that I mentioned, ashwagandha and L-theanine, are really nice for that. Now, in chronic illness, if you do caffeine or do other things, what you do is you push your body harder, so you use up your energy reserves, and you also prevent sleep. Whatever dose you take of caffeine in the morning, there's still a quarter of that left in your brain, and caffeine does block good sleep. So one thing that's really important for fatigue is getting enough sleep. It's really important to get sleep. That is hugely important. So you need 8 hours of good sleep. I have people come in all the time and say, I'm just fatigued. I just need something to fix this fatigue. And I say, well, how much did you sleep last night? Or how much do you normally sleep? And they say, oh, only about 4 to 6 hours. I sleep terrible. It's like, well, if you don't get good sleep, you're not going to be rested, because your body is basically repairing itself and restoring itself in a good night's sleep. So you have to have good sleep. Now, there are people with chronic fatigue that actually sleep too much. They sleep 8 or 10 hours, but they're not getting good sleep. And it's a sign that all these functions in the body are not being coordinated, and the cells in the body are stressed. So even if you're sleeping 8 or 10 hours and you're still fatigued, you've still got inflammation, you've still got this pot of microbes boiling over, the communications in your body are still disrupted. So all of those things have to be restored. So sleep is important, good food is important, reducing your stress is important. Exercise to generate endorphins, unbelievably important, really important. And if you can't do that, do infrared sauna or low-dose naltrexone that can help boost endorphins. That's really, really important. And then when you start getting better, there are adaptogens that are energizing, like rhodiola and eleuthera, that can help basically balance the energy systems in your body and help you get moving, and actually help everything work better, help coordinate functions, help balance all your communications so everything's getting coordinated and working better. But you have to be careful with them. They're energizing. They can actually they can make you worse for a while if you drive your body too hard, if your reserves are really low. So in the beginning, I had rhodiola and eleuthera in a lot of our products, and I found that a lot of people just didn't tolerate it because they just weren't quite getting there. So next question from Sharon. How do you treat the depression and anxiety that can be overwhelming and preventing other treatment? It gets back to that, treating the symptoms, and treating the symptoms can be really important. So early on, the solution to the symptoms is restoring the ability of your body to work, coordinating the cells, doing all the things that I just mentioned. That's the ultimate solution. That's what reduces anxiety and depression. We know that the anxiety and depression are linked to the microbes. There's a gut microbe link, but we're finding that many microbes, intercellular microbes like toxoplasma, has been directly linked to depression and anxiety, disruption of the endocannabinoid system. So ultimately restoration is going to be the solution, but that can take time. It can take years. So what do we do about the symptoms in between? And I do like the herbal solutions because they can treat the symptoms directly without paying the penalty of habituation and tolerance that occurs so much with the drugs. So my first step is herbs, and out of the herbs, balancing adaptogens, ashwagandha would be one of my favorites. L-theanine that I mentioned. Other herbs that are really nice for anxiety are bacopa, passion flower. So there's some really nice things for that. Depression, some of those same herbs are helpful with depression. The species of mimosa, I mentioned Mimosa pudica, which is a ground plant, but the mimosa tree is actually called albizia. So albizia has some nice properties for depression and anxiety, along with these other herbs that I mentioned. And CBD, top of the list. Man, CBD balances our whole system. So for depression and anxiety, it's just extraordinary. But you got to add in just the exercise component. Just getting out and moving is really, really important. Probably the best antidepressant, anti-anxiety therapy on earth that I know of is walking 3 miles. So if you have the capacity to walk, movement is good, any kind of movement. But I noticed the other day I was having to move my mother into an assisted living place. So I was moving all day, but it was like one deadline after another deadline after another deadline. And I was physically active all day and still felt stressed by the end of the day. And it's because I kept my adrenaline levels pumped up because I was having to meet these deadlines. And it was really stressful. Whereas when I just go out and walk 3 miles on a trail, man, it doesn't matter how stressed or how depressed I am. By the time I'm finished, by the time I finish that 3 miles, I'm looking at the whole world very differently. So walking can be really, really important as part of it. So the herbs are good, walking is good. In all these restorative pathways, CBD, wow, it's wonderful. And then if those things don't get it, possibly the drugs, the serotonin uptake inhibitors like Prozac and Zoloft, but they have a lot of side effects. Be really careful about benzodiazepines like Xanax and Ativan, Valium, all of these things, Klonopin. These drugs, benzodiazepines and sleeping pills, are the most addictive substances on the face of the earth. They're much more addictive than heroin, and they're much more dangerous. There is a place for them, but it's intermittent. I've said it so many times. Valium is the best drug on earth if you use it very occasionally, and your absolute worst nightmare if you use it every day. And that's true with any of these drugs. So if you do take that step, be careful. The serotonin uptake inhibitors like Prozac and Zoloft are less threatening. They don't work the same way. They're not as habituating, but they still have a lot of side effects. So try CBD. It's great stuff. It works so well. So I think this is our last question from Sandy. I've been battling Lyme for years and my recovery is happening, but it feels ever so slow. Do you have any words of hope for those of us who are worn out from the fight? Yeah, it is a battle that's won with patience and persistence. And golly, I had so many relapses and I fell flat on my face so many times and had to pick myself back up. The biggest hope I have to give is that I'm sitting here doing this right now. And I think the transition that moved me forward more than any other single thing is when I moved from that passive dependent state of who is going to save me, who is going to help me, going from one doctor to another, trying to find the person, and moving to a place of that independence and being proactive, of saying, there is an answer to this. I am going to find it, and I am going to get well. And that's when I started embracing herbal therapy. That's when my knowledge base increased. I educated myself. And it took me years. It took me years and years to educate myself, to really understand what chronic Lyme disease is, and move to a point where I could control my own options. So not to say that you shouldn't use the medical system, or you should use anything that to your advantage that you can, but you should be the one in charge, not somebody else. You should be calling all the shots. And that's why I wrote this book, Unlocking Lyme, is to empower people. That's why we're doing this 3-hour question and answer session, is to empower people. The more you know, the more you have control over your own situation, the more that you are going to be able to recover yourself. And that's what it's all about. This thing of fixing the symptoms or killing the microbes, these artificial things are not going to help you. You have to restore the ability of your body to work. Your body is a collection of 10 trillion cells. All of those cells have to be nourished, and they have to communicate with one another. And so what's happening in chronic Lyme disease is that's all being disrupted. So I can tell you there's not a drug or an antibiotic or anything else that's going to restore that process. But you can do it by taking the pressure off. Herbs are a wonderful way to support that. Balancing symptoms with herbal therapies and essential oils. Wow, it's just so powerful, and it does so much. So that's how you get your life back, and you can get there. And it's patience and persistence, but being proactive, being in control of your situation, doing this thing yourself, being in command, and finding purpose. My purpose is here doing this today. That was my purpose that propelled me, because I knew if I could figure it out, I could help other people figure it out. I could move beyond this state of illness to find purpose in myself. And that's what you find, is that a lot of people out there, that the people that get well, whether it's chronic Lyme or anything else, or any other disability that people have to deal with. Lots of people out there are dealing with disabilities. Chronic Lyme is a disability. So when you move beyond the limitations of that disability to find purpose, that's when things really, really change. That's when your life is going to start moving forward in a positive direction, finding purpose. That purpose can be helping other people with Lyme disease, but it can be other things. Anything that you can do to reach out beyond your symptoms, so your symptoms become less significant and your purpose becomes more significant, that's ultimately what is going to get you back to a state of normal health. And again, here, when we're talking about cure, we're talking about reaching a state of being symptom-free, living a normal life, living beyond whatever symptoms are remaining, so that you can continue enjoying life and having purpose. And that's what it's all about. So please take me up on my offer of a free book. That was my purpose, to spend a whole year of my life writing this thing and getting it out to people, creating our company to bring resources to people and make the whole process so much easier. So that book giveaway ends tonight. You can still get the book, but you can get it free now. rawlsmd.com/ADR/ and look up free book. That's your code for getting the book. All you got to do is pay shipping and handling, and that ends tonight. So again, you can still get the book. You just got to pay for it after that. You can find it on Amazon and other places too. Thank you very much for joining us. I hope a lot of people got a lot out of this. I know we didn't get to all the questions and answers, but there's a lot going on in our programs. I actually do this Facebook Live thing every other week for the regular people on our program. So every other week I pick a topic, and 12:30 on Tuesdays every other week, I answer questions for 30 minutes, because that's part of my purpose, is helping people through this whole process. So you may want to check that out. If your questions didn't get answered this time, there are other ways we can get to that. Support that Live Lyme Foundation. It's really good to especially support families with kids and research. If you want the transcript for this thing, it'll be available. And we have lots of new webinars coming out frequently. The book is very available. Rawls MD, we've got lots of great information there. And we've got newsletters coming your way. Please sign up for a newsletter. We are out to make a difference. So thank you very much for joining us for this long thing. And I'm going to stop now and give my voice a break for a little while. Everyone, take care.